thank everybody for coming here tonight for the workshop, and also just to let everybody know that the reason why this meeting was changed to this night is because there was conflicts on everybody can make the December 6th meeting, so we moved it to this night. So thank everybody for coming. Okay, this workshop is designed to address concerns of the public with to revise comprehensive plan and zoning changes. Tonight we have with us our planner, Christian O'Donnell and John O'Rourke. We also have our land use attorneys, Kelly Norton and Rick Golden. So if anybody in the crowd tonight has any questions about what's going on, feel free to speak to consultants, ask what's going on. We're just trying to get a little information and educate everybody to where we're at and how we got where we're at today. So if anybody's got anything, go right ahead.
Is he asking questions?
Yes,
I have a question.
could you please just state your name and where your address is, please?
Elaine Risch, 25 Park Ave. I was wondering if anyone had information about the project that's going on Skinnamonk, about 1 block up from North Main. It's directly across from Smithfield Court. There was an old stone house up on the hill. They've demolished the house, and now they're doing excavating. And they've been doing excavating for like 2 months. And it seems to be, and they're using very large machinery to do this. And I'm just wondering if anybody knows what this project is. A neighbor of mine said he heard they were putting up 4 duplexes on the property.
They can't do that. It's a two-family.
So, does anyone know exactly what's going on with this?
You confirm exactly the buildings. What they're doing is a code that's in the village code book. You can take a single-family home in an SR10, make it a 2-family. You have to confirm with the buildings department. That's exactly what's happening. This workshop is about the comprehensive plan and the zoning changes. We really want to keep to that. You can call Debbie Prue at building. She will tell you exactly what's going on.
So what you're saying is no matter how large this piece of property is, it's only zoned for a single-family or a 2-family house?
Correct. We're looking to repeal that in the law that we're putting forward in the comprehensive plan and changes.
Okay.
Okay? But just call Debbie, she can give you the exact information.
Call who? I'm sorry.
Debbie Prue with the buildings department, extension 39.
Extension 33, Debbie Prue.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome back to keep this stuff. What are we supposed to be doing based on those? Because they were violating some of those, just because there's a few lots, right? There's a few lots.
Yes.
Demoing.
Yes.
Violations, so yes, I think this was based off of the local order on something like this.
Okay. Well, even as of today, they're doing it.
Yes.
Hi, Lorraine Henkel. I live at 340 North Main Street on the corner of Highland and North Main.
Hi.
Hi. I wanted to know exactly what it is you're trying to repeal. I know that I've been home on medical leave for a few months now, and I've noticed that on North Main Street, I think that's what you're going to talk about tonight. Am I mistaken?
Well, no, that's what we want you guys to ask us. Is what we're the planner and the...
So go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so ask a question about...
So, my question is, and I'm going to stand, listen, this is my first meeting, and I read a little bit about what's, you're trying to do. I don't know exactly what it is you are trying to do on North Main Street, so if someone could tell me that.
Sure.
And then I'm sure I have other things for you. Okay.
Kristen? I'll start it off. Go ahead, John, Kristen, these are our planners.
So, on North Main Street specifically, right now it's an SR10 with a multi-family overlay zone. So during the comprehensive plan and then through the steering committee, there was a lot of confusion over the past probably 5-10 years of the multi-overlay zone, which basically allows multi-family homes along North Main Street. So what that portion did, the only thing we changed is made it basically a multi-family overlay. So there is no overlay zone. It's not an SR10. It's just URM, which is a multi-family zone. So nothing changes other than eliminating the hatch on the zoning map. But everything that you could do there before, you can still do.
Are you planning on doing anything more to that, adding as an example, and I really don't know. So are you talking about, I mean, some of the houses there, I'm sure are multifamily now.
There's a lot, yes.
There's
a lot.
quite a few further, I'm over by the mobile station, so past me, past the synagogue, going down towards Smith Clove, a lot of those houses are very large, and a lot of them are 2 and 3 family already. There's a lot of gas
Yes.
meters on the side of the house.
Mhm.
Are we really talking about consideration of adding more to that a particular house, or
No,
leaving them the way they are?
The houses stay exactly as they are. We're just cleaning up the zoning. So they're permitted now through a special use permit, but if you're actually looking at the zoning map, you see SR10.
Right.
Some of the people didn't realize that there was an overlay zone. So when people came in for a multifamily house, the neighbors come in and say, hey, I never expected this. So it's basically trying to clean up the map itself, but the use is still the same, it's still permitted, nothing has changed on that.
All right, so if it's a single-family house at this point, they are entitled to the way it is, or it's going to be, they're entitled to make a 2 or 3 family house.
Correct, and they always were.
Okay, so in other words, can the structure be made bigger or small, or whatever maybe they can? And how big can a house get?
It all depends on the size of the lot itself.
So, in particular, I don't know what the sizes of the lots are. I mean, they're all pretty much the same.
They all vary.
Right, so taking the biggest lot there is, whatever that is, how big a house could be put there?
I'd actually have to look at the lot itself, because there's a front yard setback, a side yard setback, and based upon that land that's allowed, you have to have so many square feet per unit,
Right.
and you have a maximum height of 2.5 feet. So you do all those calculations, and you can come up with how many family units.
Okay, so in essence, we don't know the size of it, so you really don't have an answer for that? Like,
No, it's
Okay.
each individual lot.
Gotcha. Okay, so I guess then my concern would be, because I have been home for quite some time and hanging around, the traffic on North Main Street. First of all, you can't make a left-hand turn anywhere in Monroe, let alone a right-hand turn onto North Main Street. If you sit down where I live, and you could look up to North Main Elementary School, there are cars up there, one of 2 things. They're so far backed up because of that light, and people block the intersection, so a do not block the intersection sign would be great for me. But, I mean seriously, you can't make a right-hand turn, that's ridiculous. But, also people, once they see, because they can sit up there, and once they see that the light is green, they're going to speed down to try to make that light, because it's very difficult to get through. So my concerns would be the traffic situation, if we're going to allow X, Y, and Z number of people more, or families more into that particular street.
Well, you're not going to see that growth up there. What's up there now, the overlay, is a URM. It just doesn't say URM, so your growth is not going to change what's existing. That's what...
Right, but if we can turn a house into a 2 or 3 family at that point,
Right.
then it certainly is going to grow.
Most of the majority of North Main is multifamily. 90% of it's probably...
Right, but we're also talking that we could add on more possibly based on someone's size of a lot.
And you're also talking about the side streets off of North Main being incorporated into that.
Yeah, that's not overlay, and that's what
She didn't... Let me answer her question first, and that would be
I was
next.
going to get to that, but you guys can take it from here.
But the North Main Street itself is not changing. What you can do there today is the same thing that's proposed. It's just under a different name.
Okay, so...
Just to make clear, for clarity purposes.
Okay, so I'm still concerned about the fact, and I know some people mentioned, and I'll certainly let them say so, those side streets that we're talking about, are we talking about them as well, off of that street?
Yes, there's over by Elm, down behind the Frontier.
Yeah.
Half the road right now is, if you're going from Frontier up, half of it is basically commercial now.
Right,
And the other half is a series of residential.
right.
So, again, through the planning board process, a lot of the neighbors down there, when a commercial entity would come in, would scream and yell, this is a residential neighborhood. So what the zoning did is modify the line and remove some of the GB where those existing houses are and added that to the URM.
Okay, is that the only street that we're really talking about, or the other side streets as well?
No, it's just the one side street that we had, that runs parallel to North Main Street.
Okay,
And then there was an extension of North Main Street past the mobile, which was also GB. The steering committee had concerns with traffic and the lots that were there, so that also became URM.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. I'm really concerned about the traffic, Jim.
And again, that was one of the issues that they took that GB
Huge
section.
traffic problem there.
Yeah, and speaking about the traffic, Park Avenue is the shortcut to Skinnamarink to avoid the light, the intersection at 201.
Actually, it's the
So
synagogue
we
that
have
is.
a lot of traffic going through, and we need more signs because no one's bothering with the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. There's a lot of speeding going on our little street that only has 11 houses.
She lives across the street.
Okay.
She often hears me scream at her as I go by. Yeah, it's crazy. What's an overlay?
An overlay, and this is where it was confusing. So you had an SR10 zone, so single family. The overlay was a special zone that the board created, let me say back in probably the 70s or 80s, that they allowed multifamily homes in certain areas throughout the village. And one of them was North Main Street. So rather than rezone it at that time, they made it the quick, easy way and say, oh, we're just going to put an overlay zone here. So if you're in North Main Street, in and out of SR10, and within the overlay district, you basically were a URM zone. So you could have a certain direction.
But you had, basically what it is that you have your underlying zoning, which is what most people will look at, say, when they buy a house or something. You'll look at the zoning, realtor will tell them what it says on the zoning map and say that it's zoned such and such. They'll look at that and say, all right, now I know what it is. The trouble is that if you didn't recognize that you're also in an overlay zone, you also have to look at that other. So what this does is merge the two, so you don't have to worry about looking at those two. You can just look at the zoning and it will tell you what you can and can't.
So then my second question is, let's just say I purchased a house on North Main, and I decided I wanted to tear it down and build a multifamily. Are there any laws in place that prevent me from building a 10-story building? You know, something that's just, okay.
Yeah. And what you so you could do that now, and you could do that if you adopt this new zoning,
Right.
either way. But there are regulations in effect based upon the lot size, the front yard setbacks, the rear yard setbacks, how much land you have. That all goes into how many units you get on your site. And correct height. So you
So
could
there's
put a
not-
6-story building.
So there's not like a standard on height? It really matters on what your lot size is as, I mean, I understand lot size would matter for depth, width, but
But then there's a
Square-
calculation that's done for how much land you have is how many units you can get into a multifamily.
so it would really matter on my lot size how high I can actually go.
Correct. Well, no, your height is limited to 2.5.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
2.5 stories is
Okay,
right.
okay,
The maximum.
It's basically your width,
okay.
but the height is locked in at 2.5 stories.
How about if people bought multiple lots? Would that affect the multi-unit, like,
Sure, if someone
can
came
they
in
buy,
there,
like, get into a loophole?
sure, if somebody went in there and bought 5 lots and consolidated it into one, they could get that many multifamily homes. They couldn't go any higher, but if they wanted to have, rip down 5 houses and build one bigger structure in the middle, I guess they could. But again, they could do that today.
Based on current zoning,
Based on
Yes.
current zoning.
but if we amended the zoning with the zoning like we're working on right now, we could affect that ability.
But you always have the ability to change the zoning to whatever you want, but there are other factors at stake as to whether or not the zoning is going to be upheld as constitutional zoning. So that's one of the other issues, that you have to have a certain amount of workforce. It's called affordable, but it's not in the way that you think of the old way that people looked at affordable housing. It means housing that usually seniors, young people, workforce people can afford. So it's not just very cheap housing, it's housing that's other than high-end market. And there are certain formulas that you have depending on where you live. And so there was a study that was done, Orange County and 2 other counties, and they sort of put targets on what amount of housing stock you should have. And so part of this zoning was to look at and make sure that you weren't going to change the zoning in a way that would open you up to a lawsuit saying that you did not have enough. So we did calculations, Kristen did calculations to determine that in fact we are compliant with that. So yes, you could change it, But when you change it, just like with many other things, is that you just have to be careful you're not changing something else that might run you into problems, so you just have to analyze it.
The study you're referring to was 2009?
Yes.
Okay. And the data that resulted from that study suggests that we are compliant, meaning that if they said 10% of our housing stock had to be within that margin of what Orange County recommended, because I think it's worded, was
The target in the
target,
particular study.
goal. And we exceed it currently based upon the changes that are made today?
I don't think that you exceed, my recollection, Kristen can chime in, is that you have an ability to make an argument that you would be compliant with that, because it's not what's needed right now, or what you have right now. It's what you have right now, what the zoning allows you to have, and allows you to get there by 2020. So if you put all those factors together, we believe that we're compliant with that requirement. And that was just a study. It wasn't like the study itself is not the rule of law, but there are constitutional provisions that basically say that you can't zone out poor people. You can't zone out lower middle class. You can't zone out working families that wouldn't have a place to live, and only zone to say, I want only 8-acre zoning that would make it so unaffordable except for very wealthy. And so that's actually a constitutional provision, and it has been enforced by the courts in New York, more so in New Jersey, but lately in New York. And so this study was to try to help municipalities, because otherwise there's no real way to kind of quantify what is enough. They say you should have your fair share. That's the brilliant phrasing that the courts have. So what is your fair share is difficult to do. And so lots of counties, Westchester did one in their county. We had this tri-county needs assessment that was done in 2009 that was projecting out to 2020. They said, all right, we believe as county planners and the county that if you follow these guidelines, then you will be in compliance. And that's what Kristen had worked hard to try to figure out what is the present stock that would fit into that category with respect to income levels, et cetera, and what is not presently multifamily homes, but could be under the zoning, and you get credited with that and credited with the growth that you might have by there. So basically, although the planners and the courts are different on this, the courts defined in New York multifamily, define affordable as basically multifamily and rentals, even though clearly some multifamilies and some rentals are not very affordable at all. They don't want to get down in the weeds and start calculating these things in court cases, so they basically say, well, if you have enough multifamily homes and rental homes or zoning that allows these, then that will satisfy the criteria.
In the study, or in your data, as a result of their study, did you find that the current apartments or multifamilies were factored into that study or into that calculation that you made?
Well, the targets that are set are 20 years out. They were 20 years out from 2009. So what we did based on the targets, we went with the building department and calculated the existing housing stock that we have and looked at the zoning to calculate a build-out analysis of what could be constructed. So that's where we determined that you were in compliance, not necessarily the existing stock that we have, but looked at those numbers and then added in what could be constructed if the entire village was built out on the existing zone, maxed out.
Do you know whether or not the comprehensive plan that was started in 2012 factored in that county study?
Yes, it's addressed.
And do you know whether or not the URMs, I think, let me ask this question first. The URMs that we've got on these, the zoning right now proposed, are a reflection of the 2013 or 2014 comprehensive plan that was passed in February? Or are there more URM zones identified in the current rezoning now?
No, I think that the map, the proposed zoning map that you have, I think is a reflection of that for the comprehensive plan. Nothing, no new changes to that zoning, proposed zoning has been suggested since that time.
So the URMs that are identified right now today, this evening, are the ones that were adopted in 2014 in the zoning? Am I asking that correctly?
No,
The zonings weren't adopted.
the zone wasn't adopted in 2014.
Okay,
Only the
so,
plan was.
well, the plan, right? The plan identified certain zoning.
Yes,
Okay.
all it is,
Needs.
the change was, the only change from there to now is rather than call it a multi-overlay zone, we just called it URM. So, like, back to North Main Street, that area was always identified to keep as a multifamily overlay zone. So the only difference is between the comp plan that was adopted is rather than call it multi-overlay zone, we just called it URM.
I'm trying to get my head around the multifamily overlay and URM.
The multifamily overlay on North Main Street, because that's where it was, basically took the SR10 and made it a URM. So for clarity purposes, because people were coming and not realizing there was an overlay zone, we just called it a URM. So there really is no change other than the language.
In a multifamily overlay, could somebody take 5 lots on the current North Main Street configuration of housing and take them down and build something to?
Yes. Yeah, anybody at any time can buy multiple lots, combine them into one, and then develop that as one lot.
Okay. So what would be the biggest difference between a multifamily overlay and a URM?
That's what I'm saying, there's
There's
none.
There is no, it's already existing.
Right,
You just change the language for clarity.
right. So I guess my question then is, why change it?
Because it was confusing for people living on North Main, when someone come in to the planning board, the zoning board, saying, we want to build a multifamily, and it's a special use, so you'd have to go to the planning board and have a public hearing. People in the audience would basically raise their hand and say, I live in an SR10, how can you allow this?
Right.
And the answer was, you live in an SR10, but there's an overlay zone. And a lot of people, because it's not on your tax bill, people don't realize that when they bought that they were in an overlay. So it's basically just to kind of help the people buying houses there in the future, so they actually know what they're getting.
I think design standard, that was discussed at the conference, design standards in the URM that did not apply to.
That did not apply, yes.
Right, so this also would require all of the development in this URM zone to comply with the design standards that are set up in the zoning and recommended in the comprehensive plan as well. But I think the SR10 overlay was just kind of over one area of SR10 that didn't really address, didn't really have the stricter requirements of design and things like that, building design.
Separation of the two, honestly, really seems vague. John, you referred to somebody coming in and not understanding what they're buying into. I can't imagine someone coming into a realtor and saying, I want to move into a URM or I want to move into an SR10. They don't think you can bring that up. I'm just wondering,
Oh, sure they-
who are those people?
Well, they come in and they say, what is it zone? What can I do here? And many realtors would tell them, they look up and say, oh, it's zone SR10. And this is what you do in SR10. And that's where they end the conversation. And so they don't do enough to say, oh, and you also have an overlay zone, and this can also be done.
So people were buying homes, and next to them became a multifamily, and they would say, how can this happen? I bought a single-family home in an SR10, they should all be single-family. And the answer is, well, no, because there's an overlay zone that you're allowed to do that. So rather than creating layer upon layer, we just have one layer that limits it. There's no, if anything, it's a little bit more restricted now, as Kristen related to the architectural standards. But what you could do on North Main Street today doesn't change other than the name if you adopt the zoning next year.
But allows somebody to be able to say or exemplify what you can do based on your statement, which is to say if you had a URM designation to it, it has a definition and somebody would be willing to offer that out onto the table, say, hey, this is a URM, what can I do? You're in a URM, this is what you can do. As you would in an SR10, as you would in a CB, or, right?
Correct.
The URM district, one of the concerns that I have and I had submitted this in my documents to you, my letter, has to do with this URM. Several areas within the village bounds were zoned SR10, SR20, and are now listed as URM, am I correct? Or proposed?
Only one area, which would be the trailer park, the rest are GB.
Yeah.
The general business.
Okay.
Actually, what about the area across the street from Sacred Heart Church?
That's GB. That's general business.
Not according to the map, it's not.
Only one, the one lot behind the captain's table was, the other 4 or 5 were not, I believe they were SR10.
They were GB in the past.
Okay.
Again, back in the 70s, the whole front, what was happening, the whole front portion is all wetlands, so you can't get back there. So when we had, in front of the planning board, and the comp plan looked at it, there was a couple developments that wanted to do commercial there in the back. The people in Stevens Lanes basically went crazy because they did not want commercial, because the only way to access that piece was through Stevens Lane. So the comp plan said, it's a small piece of property surrounded by wetlands. What can somebody do if they own that property? We don't want commercial. So they went with basically making that URM as well.
And the URM, this URM is including single-family homes too.
Right, no, I just find it peculiar that just those specific lots are all owned by the same LLC based out of Spring Valley, Houston Square more specifically. And I just wonder why, like, did you throw a dart at the map? And just, like, who decided that those specific ones?
The comprehensive plan, which had studied probably 3 years, there was public hearings, charrettes, they went through the whole process. We had multiple public hearings, and people from Stevens Lane basically came in and said, we do not want commercial back here. The trailer park, again, it was matching what was existing.
Why not make it SR10?
Yeah, why not change the, he just said,
Stevens Lane
that
has
change
SR10.
the zoning to anything, so why not get rid of the overlay and make it all SR10? If we have the capability to change the zoning. to
Because
make
Kristen
it more
just
restrictive.
explained, we have to meet a certain housing stock.
Right, but Monroe has, the housing prices have gone down by 40% since 2009. I find it very hard to believe that we don't have affordable housing.
What's being built in Smith Farm, I can't afford that. There doesn't seem to be any concern about that over there.
Yeah, I mean, we were
Isn't
told
it-
by the bank, we have some of the lowest housing values in Orange County. Our housing values keep dropping and dropping. You don't hear that in Warwick, Chester, Goshen, wherever. So why would we all of a sudden, we're not meeting a certain criteria? I find that very hard.
Like Neil even brought up, what if you did, I mean, we're not, like they said, it's an advisement, and there's no, they didn't identify any kind of threshold. Was that ever explored? Oh, maybe get rid of the overlay, but make it SR10, SR20. Would that put us too far under affordable housing? Was that ever explored?
The answer during the comprehensive review was, especially along North Main Street, the majority of those homes were multifamily. The comprehensive plan did not want to zone out 35 homes and make those homes not meet their zoning. So were they going to ever take North Main Street and just make it SR10? I don't believe that was brought up in the comp plan, to my knowledge. It was not.
But that goes back to my question, John. When we talked about the overlay, URN and the SR10, and all, when you're looking at URN and the comprehensive study, there was no zoning change. The zoning changes come as a result of the comprehensive plan's recommendations.
Correct.
So if the comprehensive plan talks about several things, including making affordable stock, we didn't identify, and correct me, but we didn't identify that area, let's say, as to a point of Sacred Heart, was that area identified in the comprehensive plan as a location where URM could be designated?
I don't quite get the question because it was already, the stock of those units was already considered because it was in the overlay district. Okay, so if you're looking at you refer to workforce housing or affordable housing, that area was considered because it was in an overlay district. So all those lots could have been developed as multifamily. So yes, that was considered.
Okay, multifamily.
Yes, because it was in the overlay district.
And what about from looking at that map by Franklin, over like where that lot is, shared textiles? What is that going to be?
What is that going to be?
Yeah.
What is it
looks like
proposed?
it's
Yes.
for,
It's general business now.
It's general business, and then during the comp plan, I don't remember specifically, because again, I didn't do the comp plan, you had meetings, but that was one of the ones that they thought would fit nicely, rather than having GD kind of buried over there, they thought that might be a decent place to have a multifamily or a unit there. Seemed to fit into the neighborhood more than a large business or warehouse. Because again, being surrounded by those single families.
I'm trying to concern the residents, or present the residents' concerns, with at least some of them that I share, and I imagine others on the board do. But when you say about, when you get to use the comprehensive plan as part of the argument in its recommendations, I feel that we're backing away when it comes to the conclusions that I want to draw here, with saying the URM is being considered here, here, and here because it made sense. At what point, and I get the fact that study was done in 2012, it's 2017, and I think a lot of things have changed. I think the economics of the village have changed, I think things have changed for the folks, and I'm trying to say, where does that come into this conversation? Where does the village's voice come into this?
Comes into the plan being adopted, us to follow, that's what comes into.
Well, it does, but it also is a result
That's
of...
what's given the guidance.
Right, but then if the village or its residents deem, or as I read the documents, I recognize that, it defined it. It's the residents that define what they want in their village, outside of what constitutionality may be with regard to housing stock. I don't know much else.
Well, again, that was through the whole process of the
Agreed.
comp plan, that you had those public hearings, they were very well attended. A lot of people were there, and they all had input. I mean, we had bulletin boards and circling and presentations, and what do you think is good, what do you think is good, and that's what took several years to go through. So that's where the public input came from. And quite frankly, we had quite a few of those public hearings.
Are we part of that then?
Excuse me?
Are you part of it then?
On the master, yeah.
Are these,
Yeah, they asked me to go again because it's a representative thing. But there was a series of, there's a whole committee that was there. At that time, later, the beginning of it, there was a whole series of public hearings and notifications.
My concern is, we keep saying affordable housing, affordable housing. The reality of it is, we can't say it's going to be affordable housing, but we're hanging our hat on affordable housing.
Well, that was the definition because rental units, whether they're high-end or low-end, are considered affordable housing.
Which
So-
seems ridiculous,
Yeah, so-
right?
It's because the alternative to the courts, because they're dealing with challenges, legal challenges to zoning. Say, oh, somebody comes in, there's another municipality, there's another property owner, and they say, your zoning violates this Berenson principle, this zoning that has to comport with a wider range of zoning choices for different income levels. And so the courts could get down and start to itemize exactly what's affordable in this particular house, what type of housing would be able to do, and take all that time and analyze it. But quite frankly, the courts in New York anyway, New Jersey does more of that, but the courts in New York seem like they don't really want to get involved with all that. So they said, well, let's have a simpler definition. Generally, multifamily homes are more affordable, and generally rental units are more affordable. So we'll go that if you have zoning that allows enough of this multifamily and rental units, then we'll say that's good enough. We're not trying to knock down and analyze every single municipal code. We'll allow that to pass constitutional muster.
That seems like a lot of latitude here. New York State is just lazy about, how they want to implement that. I mean, doesn't seem like a great, we're really trying to make affordable housing in those places and just saying, well, in general, rental units and we'll fill that bill. That just doesn't seem to apply, especially given the environment we're in this area. It seems kind of risky to me.
Well, the problem is that we can only work with the court cases that are interpreted. And any challenge to the zoning that's enacted are going to look to those cases for guidance. And it's essentially, the courts are saying, they don't want to really be the planners for all these municipalities and decide exactly what type of housing you should have in any particular municipality. But we have this sort of bottom that we're trying to protect, that you're not doing something that's unconstitutional. They said, all right, here's a way. I agree with you that it's not a very good way, but it's the way that we have to be governed. So what we were asked to do.
In New York, I mean, that's
In New York.
like classic. This state, you just always do things because that's the way they always did it, and you need to push back from the bottom. I just, you know, see that all the time. That's the way it is in New York, you know.
I mean, you have, to one degree or another, you have the same principle, the federal constitutional principle, right? Zoning was determined to be constitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court back in the 1920s. Zoning is pretty recent. And they said, you can have it as long as it comports with certain constitutional principles. And one of them has evolved to be this affordability concept. You can't go ahead and zone out anybody but the ultra-rich. And so any municipality then doesn't want to enact zoning that's just going to be knocked down and go through the litigation costs and everything else. And so what they have done is asked us to look at this to try to make sure that we're not making some legal mistake in when this plan is being put in place, that it's going to be subject to an easy challenge. And so, you know, we have this needs study that was done in 2009 by the Tri-County. Courts are looking at things like that in order to determine whether or not you have enough of these units.
When you say zone out, does that mean changing zoning, or just your existing zoning is preventing people from coming in? I mean, when you say zone out, something, oh, we're going to make this change that's going to exclude a certain demographic from.
Well, it's actually, it's a very good query, because it actually is called by the courts exclusionary zoning. That's what you can't have. And so they go through these other mechanisms to try to figure out whether or not you have exclusionary zoning, whether you're zoning for a purpose that's unconstitutional, that is to keep out other than rich people. And so they come up with these tests, and they're very imperfect. Every state has them to one degree or another. In New York, it's actually more lenient than in a place like New Jersey, where they get down into a lot of the detail and they start calculating square footage, they start calculating exactly the income levels to a much greater degree. And so New York, I think the courts were trying to say, we'll allow the municipalities to go ahead and take care of their zoning. We're not going to try to be there and watch them over their shoulder every time they make a new zoning law. But make sure that it doesn't fall below this standard, this exclusionary standard. And so that's what we try to do, is to look at the current zoning. It wasn't something that, as I understand, I wasn't here then, but during the, we're not part of the process, I was here, but the comprehensive plan process was a very open and public process in which there were public committees and things. It wasn't just dictated by any planner or by the board by themselves. And they came up with this comprehensive plan that said certain things. We were trying to implement that plan through zoning, and we were brought in to say, well, does this plan satisfy the law with respect to several different areas, but one of which is this exclusionary zone, so that they're not going to go through all this process and then just get sued and then have to start over.
So is there a way, because obviously North Main was and is going to remain a URM, is there a way to change the zoning or the wording that says you can in fact buy 5 lots and put a giant monstrosity there with, 25 units, instead every lot stays a lot and you put your family that way?
I'll defer to the, but
I'm
right
just
now,
curious.
but right now, any lot throughout the entire village can be bought and combined. So if you had a small commercial lot, you could buy the 3 next to you, and you could make it.
No, right, I understand. So my question is there a way to change that?
No, because I say no, the number of units, whether you have 1 lot or whether you have 10 lots, that area only can create so many units. So whether you have 1 lot and you have 5 houses, 5 units in it, and the next lot you have 5 units on it. If you combine the two, you don't get more units than anything, you
No,
probably
but you
get
change
less.
the way it looks.
You said
But-
the character
but-
of the building is what.
Right, so-
Plus there's architectural
You could, right, so you
requirements.
could, that's how you control the character of an area, through architectural requirements. If you said that a building could only, a maximum of so many units, you could set a maximum, but theoretically, if you're zoning, you could set a maximum building length, 100 feet, whatever, you could set a maximum building length, you could set, you already have a height requirement, so 2.5 stories is the maximum height. You could conceivably do those things, yes. The question is, what are you, if that's what you're trying to do, you're trying to control the character, so the structure doesn't look bigger than any of the other structures that are existing. You probably can't control somebody buying the whole area, you can't really control that, but you can control if they buy 5 lots and they have to still build 5 structures, if they want to get that number. Whether that's better or worse is I guess, a policy question, that's for you to decide, but you certainly could do that.
Well, I mean, it's actually a very interesting question. I've never heard it before, as to whether or not you could basically say, because obviously these lots were much bigger at one point in time, they got subdivided down to what they are now. So your question is, can you by zoning freeze that process and not allow a reversal of it? I've never heard of that before, I've never seen it litigated before. There are some other principles in zoning that you have to be careful not to step on, but you may be able to do that. I'd have to look at it, but I can't give you an answer right now. It's a very interesting question.
In some places, they require the building to be broken up, more than saying that there have to be 5 individual structures, but they would require a different facade called architectural articulation. It's just nerdy planning, but you have facades that you either push back a little bit or right back. You see them sometimes in like really modern, like strip shopping centers. They have different facades, be blue and then brick and then whatever. So you could have that. I mean, that's kind of an option through architectural design to control it, as opposed to necessarily a requirement to build 5 structures. Because they're buying them, they're going to want to build it out, whether they want to build 5, whether you prefer 5 structures or 1. I don't think that, I don't know.
I mean, you understand it would change the entire character of
Absolutely.
that area,
So-
of any of these areas,
You're
actually.
thinking about 2,000 feet of flat front, all brick. In your mind, you're picturing that kind of thing, like a city law.
No, I listen, I think if you're putting a building on 5 lots, I don't care if it's pushed back, forward, if it looks like the Orange County Department of Motor Vehicles, it just doesn't fit our area, is what I'm saying. And if there was a way to make it 1 lot, 2 apartments, 4 apartments, however many apartments, and still keep the way that looks, the integrity of it, that would be something I would be interested in getting the answer to.
I think there is requirements for.
May I?
Just state your name, Bonnie, please. Address.
Bonnie Franson, resident, Village of Monroe. I just have a series of questions or comments, so I don't know if I'll just say them all or back and forth. Number 1, I walked in with regards to discussion on affordable housing. And I looked at the previous GDIS and the proposed comp plan revisions. You know, when you're doing an update, at this point, you should consider whether the 3-county housing needs assessment should even be used. It was written and published in 2009. The data are from like 2006. It's all at the height of the housing market bubble, and the recession happened afterwards. There are specific numbers that were referred to as our need for affordable housing that came from that document, that in the 2014 document, the affordable housing need may have been in the 10s, the 20s. The numbers were changed in this 2016 draft to suggest that there are significantly more affordable housing units needed. And that's on the basis of an old housing study. So I think that really needs to get looked at, because I think, from my perspective, it looks like there is a sudden huge demand for affordable housing, which there may or may not be, but it's not based on more recent data.
But that's fine, and if I was assured that you were going to be the judge on a case when it gets challenged, and you would throw out that study, that would be fine. But I will tell you that judges like to have some sort of data that they can grab onto, and they will look at this if there's nothing else. If there's a better study out there, they would look at a better study.
Or a newer study that's based on current conditions that look at the fact that we've had stagnant market. And what I want to get to is there were actually, the study was referred to in 2014, and the needs, the affordable housing needs, it was indicated as being something like 30 or 40 units. The same study now is suggesting many, many more hundreds of units are needed. So why would there be a different conclusion using the same study? So I'd like just some background on why the numbers were changed from my perspective.
The numbers were looked at fresh with respect to how properly to analyze the data in that report and the zoning that's in place or proposing in place, which in many instances doesn't change present zoning with respect to the number of units. And those are the numbers that came out. So, and there was some mistakes that were made in some of the numbers in the prior study, so that was also correct.
Okay. In terms of design guidelines, there's a lot of discussion about what things should look like. And another question I have is, there was in the 2014 plan a recommendation to adopt design guidelines that would be used by the AARB in reviewing certain applications. The 2016 plan, I don't see any recommendation in it to actually dissolve the AARB. And the suggestion and recommendation that design guidelines be implemented has actually been removed. And instead it says we should rely on historic postcards, et cetera, to be a guide for architectural standards. So I'd also like to know, if it wasn't in the 2014 plan, why the AARB is being dissolved. I acknowledge that the planning board is being given that authority, but it's not clear to me why the AARB is being dissolved. Another item has to do with the fact that there's no mention in the 2014 plan, the 2016 plan, the zoning amendment addressing the zoning map, that the environmentally sensitive overlay is being removed. So it's not shown on the current plan, it's being removed, there's no support for it. Why is it being removed?
We can clarify that. The previous environmental overlay district had nothing in the zoning. It was a district, but it didn't require any additional permitting or reviews or anything else. So the committee thought it basically mapped existing wetlands throughout the village.
Right, it mapped environmentally sensitive areas.
But it didn't require, there was nothing under the zoning code, current zoning code, that said if you're in this zone, you have to do this or that.
If something happens in that zone, I think it requires a special use permit. In addition, there's a use table attached to it which says only certain things are allowed because there aren't supposed to be buildings in the environmentally sensitive overlay district. So there are regulations there and they're being taken out. And from my perspective, there isn't a justification for it.
I've been looking at that. I don't remember why they specifically took it out, but that was my understanding.
And then going further, the 2014 plan talked about environmentally sensitive areas that presently that there's a deduction for environmentally sensitive features when figuring out density. I think it's for the cluster subdivisions. And the 2014 plan recommended that, well, that should really be applied at the conventional subdivision stage. So in other words, if you're considering density of a subdivision and you have a big fat wetland on it, then you don't count that land when you're trying to figure out what to do for that project. So if anything, it was the direction of let's make everything consistent and have that applied to conventional, or again, make it consistent between cluster and conventional subdivisions. The 2016 plan is recommending that we actually take away the deduction for the cluster subdivisions rather than being more environmentally protective and just applying it to all subdivisions. So that's a concern of mine as well.
Bonnie, can I go back to,
I want to finish one point with those two items, and then, I'm sorry, Rick, only because, so I was involved in litigation with this village over the Roscoe Smith farm. And from my perspective, if that developer wants to come in and he wants to now propose a cluster because of past history and getting density illegally from in the manner that it was done, if you take out the environmentally sensitive overlay, now he gets to use that land as his yield. If you don't have him deduct environmentally constrained lands, again, his yield goes up. So, you know, I am looking at it specifically with regard to the Roscoe Smith property. There was a plan already in place, it had been approved, the preliminary plat supposedly expired, although there's actually a question in my mind whether that's the case. There's been discussions at the village board level with preserving it as it was originally approved so that the village would get the land and the developer would get his yield. But if they're going to come back to the table and they're going to propose a development, these restrictions that are being removed are going to allow more on that site, which is already packed. So that's my concern.
I didn't analyze that piece, but I was trying to get back to the affordable housing
Yes.
aspect. And just so that it's clear, there was nothing done, to my knowledge, in this new iteration of trying to have zoning laws in place to conform to the comprehensive plan that was passed. To try to say, oh, we need more affordable housing in the village, so let's go ahead and rezone it in a way that has more affordable housing. That's not done. What was done was that under the present zoning, that it was looked at to see whether or not it complied with the zoning requirements for affordable housing, right? And there were no changes that were made to say, oh, we're falling short, so let's go ahead and have more affordable housing. That wasn't done.
Okay, and that may be because by increasing the number of what is supposed to be the affordable housing need based on an old study, it gives, if anything, it gives the appearance that that's why all the URM zones are coming into being. Now, as far as URM zones, I don't necessarily, I think if used in the proper way and having additional housing in the village in the proper places, it may not be a bad thing. But from my perspective, perhaps it should be done in a different way, perhaps as a floating zone where there's a little more discretion.
I don't think you were here at the very beginning, but we talked about that, and that's really why.
No, I wasn't here from the beginning.
Okay, so what happened was that people in the SR district would just look at the SR regulations and say, oh, there's no affordable housing here, so therefore I'll make a choice of living here, not realizing that there was an overlay zone that allowed it. So what? Right. So in order to not increase the multifamily, it's simply to make it clearer, because you allow multifamily now, and you allow the multifamily in the proposed, so that doesn't change.
Right, but SR10 at this point doesn't allow multifamily?
In the overlay, with the overlay it does.
In the multifamily, you're talking about the SR10 on North Main Street.
Yes.
I'm talking about, that's just the multifamily housing overlay. SR10 throughout doesn't allow multifamily housing.
No, I didn't say that.
So, and I've actually had this conversation with the mayor at one point. I think that there could be a village-sponsored affordable housing program or some kind of development in the appropriate places that could even possibly be on village-sponsored land. But from my perspective, I like that concept because the village is in the seat, it's in control. If we're going to have URM zones added to other locations, which is what's happening, it's not just on North Main Street, there are other URM zones that appear, I think, that are being added, unless someone wants to say.
Well, we already discussed that, maybe you missed that
Yeah,
conversation
I
as well.
So instead of maybe doing it as of right, if it was a floating zone, and you included all the design aspects that have been described, maybe it does have some design guidelines specific to it, or architectural, or et cetera, then the village board would have to approve it, and maybe they'd have a little more discretion over it. Again, rather than just having it land. So it's just the reaction I have. The last question I have has more to do with procedure. When I looked at the 2016 plan.
I do need to respond to that last point. On the affordable housing front, from the point of view of the courts, is that if your affordable housing is only done not as of right, but by discretion, then they don't count it as affordable housing. Right? Because they believe then that what would happen is that everything would be by discretion and you'd never do their counts of whether or not you have sufficient fair share of affordable housing, it has to be zoning as a
Affordable housing really showing that you're providing multifamily housing?
Excuse me,
Isn't it really about showing multifamily housing?
multifamily and rental, yes.
Okay, so affordable, you also remind me that when the three-county housing needs assessment was done, I think, and it would have to be checked, I think it broke it down by town, not by village.
They did, but we...
I think there were extrapolations made.
Yes, there were. It has to be because they didn't do it by village.
They didn't do it by village, but I would say that the town's demand is in part created by other villages as well, and was it extrapolated in the way that it should have been? That's a question, I don't know whether it was or not.
It's extrapolated based on population percentage, so as the village of Monroe's population is a percentage of the overall town, the affordable housing need was then assumed to be that same percentage.
So not housing units, it was based on population. Okay.
I don't know if you're aware, but there's a huge discrepancy in population between a few villages in this town.
Correct, that's why the housing need was looked at based on population of this village as a percentage of the overall town as opposed to just area. If we used area, right, the population of the village would be inflated. Area of the village versus in the town. We look at population so the village of Monroe is population as a percentage of the overall population of the town, and then we're looking at kind of more appropriate number of housing units to provide for this population.
Sorry, I was going to just ask, no, that's okay. I was going to ask a procedural question was, in 2014, the comp plan was prepared by like a comprehensive plan committee, it was a steering committee. My question is, for 2016, the way that the comprehensive plan is written, it suggests that there was a steering committee. But to my knowledge, I don't think it was the same steering committee meeting, or did they bring the steering committee together again to put together the new amendments to the comprehensive plan and to the zoning, where they...
The bulk of the committee was still intact. There was a zoning board, planning board, building department. Not everybody came back for whatever
Some
reason.
developers.
Excuse me?
Isn't there some developers?
Oh, that man dropped out a long time ago. Mr. Zucker dropped out 2 years ago. He did not come back. He wasn't even there for the finish of the comprehensive plan and its adoption. But these were volunteers from the other boards, came back, reviewed it. You noticed there was changes going on in the community, and we did pass that comprehensive plan should be reviewed every year. So that's where changes started coming about. So we also found some laws that needed to be changed that were not conducive to SR 10 and SR 20. It could actually affect them terribly. Look, John?
Yes, real quick, John Carl, Lady Monroe. Regarding the North Main corridor, and I heard Trustee Coghlan's comments about incorporating lots together contiguously. That may be an opportunity for both market-driven, 55 and over housing, as well as affordable senior housing. I think that would be an ideal place to see that. It's walkable. We need people walking in this village, for this village downtown here to survive. The town of Monroe walked out on us. We tried to keep the governments in this village, so it brings people to the downtown area. We're going. So obviously we know what their priorities are. But by bringing both market-driven and affordable senior housing and encouraging it up there is going to make it a more walkable community for the residents, the elderly. And it's something that we should look at. If somebody wants to come in and take 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 lots and bring them all together, this is what we're looking for. Workforce housing. It's always been kind of a thorn in my side around here, because what is workforce housing? We have, this gentleman back here made a mention about one community within the town of Monroe that employs a lot of people, but doesn't allow those people to live in their community. So they wind up in the village of Monroe. Whether it's Trailer Park, whether it's North Main Street, Stunham, it's there. Anybody that drives around and knows what's going on can see what's going on. So we're getting the fallout of one village's high density growth and nonstop growth. The workforce is coming into the village of Monroe with it. There's nothing out there for workforce housing. They don't want people living in their community. They're going to be a burden to their school district outside of their residence. That's the bottom line. Pull no punches, that's the bottom line. They will not allow children that are not part of that community to live out there because their school system won't support them. So we're here, we're supporting them through our school taxes. But North Main Street, getting back, I think that's something we should look at, market-driven and affordable senior housing. The highest, it used to be, I don't know if it still is, the highest piece of densely populated property in Orange County, at least it was up until I got out as mayor, was Monroe Commons, right here in the village of Monroe. 35 units on a little more than a half an acre.
Correct.
So that's the affordable type of housing, whether that's what we want to see. But if you do the market-driven along that corridor as well, if you've ever been to Warwick Road and see how that's developed over in Warwick, which is a 55 and over community, it may be something to really look at. Because I think that would be a shot in the arm for the downtown Monroe area if we focused on doing something up there.
Anybody else want to wrap up the workshops?
I have a question for Connolly, Village Monroe. This may be a novice question, and maybe I just missed part of the presentation because I arrived a little later. But since we are a municipality within a larger municipality, the town of Monroe, wouldn't some of the municipality from the town cover some of our URM requirements? I mean, there is another village in this town that has a significant amount of URM and multifamily housing. Would we encompass some of that as part of the percentage of what we would need because we're a village within a town that has that?
Cases haven't gone that way yet. Right?
Well, just because it hasn't gone that way yet doesn't mean it can't.
Anything can happen. The courts can completely turn around and say you don't have to have any affordable housing. But I don't think that's going to happen. So what we can do is, based upon what the law is, try to make sure that this law is compliant. Otherwise, you're simply inviting a lawsuit to go ahead and challenge it. What the law says is that each municipality has an obligation to provide for affordable housing in their zone. The town zoning does not cover the village, and the village doesn't cover the town. So it's up to every municipality that has zoning to go ahead and zone it in a way that's constitutional. So we can't say, well, we don't have to have any because some other municipalities take it. The courts have said no to that so far.
So could we just, make a section? Why do we have to have all these different pockets of URM? And my area where I live in the village is going to be hit really hard. And if you're talking about behind Sacred Heart, and now we've got Shea Meadow Farms up all over there, I might as well move back to Long Island because that's what I'm afraid this whole community is going to be. Congestion, multifamily homes, illegal apartments, legal apartments. Excuse me.
I'm trying to answer your question.
But I'm also addressing you, and I'm just that's a little eye contact. It's just polite. So why do we have to have all these different pockets of URM? I think what Mr. Carl had stated would be actually a pretty decent idea is to put some injection into this downtown that is slumping really poorly, and it's a travesty of what it looks like these days. Let's bump it, give the UR zoning into one area, encompass that percentage of what we need instead of these pockets of URM zoning that in my mind's eye will become a high-density nightmare. And especially if we don't put these hard restrictions on height, amount of units per lot or whatever it is. That's what we should do, not all these different pockets. So that's my piece.
Actually,
actually, you bring up a good point, Ronnie, because there's,
I was trying to answer.
oh, sorry, Rick. I just want to mention conceptual land use plan after you say that.
This is the plan that the planning committee came up with, and now it's being tried to implement. So I just don't want you to get the feeling that it was us up here that just said, oh.
No, I understand.
And the reason I turned to John is that I'm not familiar with where you're living as to exactly what has changed in the new zoning, so I was asking John, who probably knows, to tell you what has or has not changed, because there's a lot of, I think, confusion as to people thinking that a lot has changed in some areas when it hasn't changed.
I think part of the confusion too is a 2014 plan. Something that's pretty fundamental to most comprehensive plans is it has a conceptual land use plan. And it's a blobby map that shows the village or the town. And it says generally there's going to be suburban residential, generally there'll be rural residential, but it's a map. So there was a discussion of additional multifamily locations potentially in the village, but it wasn't actually mentioned. It was intentionally vague, I think. And so now, when we get to the zoning, you have a reaction that, wait a minute, where did this come from? Because there wasn't that fundamental map in the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, but it's also, as you know, I mean, that's not unusual for comprehensive plans, that they're to go ahead and set a broad vision. Now, some are more specific than others. Others are very vague throughout the whole comprehensive plan. So there is, you know, there really isn't one comprehensive plan that fits all. There's no model comprehensive plan that fits everything. So,
although having prepared 10 or so, they all have had, you know, it's rare that they don't have them. Again, because it doesn't, then it allows people to know what is being
actually,
conceptualized.
I've read many plans that have not had that kind of detail at all. And purposely so. I mean, I wasn't part of this planning process for this comprehensive plan, so I don't know whether that was a decided choice or whether it was simply by default. Do you know whether or not anything has changed with respect to
Well, are you talking off at the end of Stevens Lane?
No, excuse me.
Stevens Lane, you're talking about, right? Across from Sacred Heart Church?
Yes. Yeah, that area there's, I guess, like you were talking about.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. There's one small pocket back there that was GB. It's basically surrounded by wetlands, so you can't access it off of 17. And before, when it was originally designed as a GB. So we had a couple developments that came in front of the planning board. This was discussed during the comp plan and the steering committee, that the people in Stephen Lane did not want commercial because it was zoned commercial. So, but the only way to access it was through Stevens Lane. So rather than have it GB and have that issue come up again, they decided to make a URM to have a small pocket of potentially single-family or multi-family back at the end of Stevens Lane. But you don't have access off of 17 because of the wetlands, and that's why it was taken out of the GB zone.
John, that could be an ideal senior housing. because
Perfect senior housing.
Your infrastructure, your sidewalks are all in place for the elderly to walk down the sidewalk and go to the grocery stores.
Agreed.
Yeah, but
That's
we don't know
Create a
if the
senior housing
owner,
zone.
we have no idea if the owner of that land plans to do
No, they wouldn't, so why wouldn't, so you advise, but then why can't the village go back to you and say, oh, why don't we make a more specific zone called 55 homes? Well, I mean, that could be one way.
We didn't advise, there was committees, and that's what they came up with over the last.
Well, no, I'm saying you advise as far as where you have to cover yourself as far as affordable housing. But I'm saying that they could turn around and make, oh, well, you know what, this section across from Sacred Heart, well, we won't make that URM, we could make it more specific and say it has to be 55 homes.
Actually, I think
Can I hold on to, can I address senior housing real quick? We did change the law quite some time ago. Senior housing, we have a floating zone senior housing in this village. And we also increased the density on its acreage. So you could put a 55 and older community anywhere in this village.
But that
Well,
would
we're concerned
satisfy the.
And I'm saying, you
housing
can put it into
requirements
GB
as well.
behind, we've actually had people look at that property, we've had people look at the property across the street from the golf course, we've had people look at the property here in the corner. Unfortunately, the property owners wanted too much money. The senior developers, Jonah Mellenbaum was one of the biggest ones in the state of New York, walked away. And there was another company from Westchester because the property owners, St. James Motel was another area that would be great for senior housing. And the property owner wanted way too much money, the developer walked away. So it's great to have that, I get it, but we've created a senior housing 55 and older law that gives us the opportunity to build, maybe when it was projected years ago at its time, they wanted to build on that 5-acre lot years ago. So Senior housing has been addressed, 55 and over.
But maybe it should land, because the argument's been made that if it's a floating zone, then it doesn't count toward affordable housing in the eyes of the court. So
Correct.
instead,
It
maybe
depends- it
zone it
depends
one
on-
thing and put an overlay zone there.
It depends upon the structure of the affordable housing, I mean, the senior housing, it might qualify. But I do want to address what you said. It wasn't that we were advising the board to say, go ahead and put more affordable housing here and there. That wasn't it. This plan came about organically by itself. We came at the very end of the process just to make sure that in fact it qualified. That's all, that it satisfied the requirement. So it wasn't, the process wasn't driven by trying to create enough affordable housing. It was when that process was at the end, we were brought in to ensure, among other things, that the end product was something that had been organically grown, was something that was legal to put in place. Right? So it wasn't something where we were trying, oh no, you should have more affordable housing, we need more affordable housing. That didn't happen.
In your review, when you looked at all the existing URM zones, all the apartment complexes, they didn't create all the new developments in the village, anything that's multifamily or townhouse, was there a determination that that alone still would it be enough to satisfy a challenge to multifamily housing, that there isn't sufficient or that there's not sufficient affordable housing? Because there are URM zones, and there are apartment complexes, and there are many.
The analysis was that this process, when it came out with saying, all right, these are our recommendations, was then to simply analyze that to make sure that it passed constitutional muster. It wasn't trying to create more affordable housing.
So you were reviewing something that was already generated by a group that said, we want to
Yes.
add URM zones here, or?
Yes. Right.
Yeah, it was, most of it, other than the Highland Sacred Heart, it was matching existing, whether it was a trailer park or North Main Street. There wasn't, I want to get this true, there wasn't massive areas that were added to the URM. It was still, Stevens Lane, the section along North Main Street, where it's Elm over by Frontier, and the trailer park. And the specific over here. But it
The
wasn't-
textile was the reason why it was picked to have some affordable housing in the sense is young people want to stay in the community, seniors that don't want to be senior housing. Textile place was picked as a perfect example because in the plan, walkable distance to recreation, walkable distance to downtown. It seemed like a perfect place to change that general business to it. This came out of the public input saying, look, we can't afford houses, and yes, the market has changed, we realize that. But through the process, that was discussed about young people that want to stay in the community that might not want a home. It was more than just sitting there. I hope we get hung on affordable housing. It was different housing options, and that's what the URM gives you. We're trying to meet the stock that we, according to the study, that we should be close to. That was a perfect example of taking a general business that has not come back. You have a great piece of property right next to the park, walking distance to the village. Why not create it, and maybe in the URM that's being created, this single-family home in that. Make it a single-family home at all. It's giving opportunity.
As part of the secret process, it would be really useful for the village board to get a map, because you can do it in GIS, that shows what the existing zones were and where the new zones are. So it's very clear to people where the new and changed zoning districts are located. Because I think visually, it's just easier for people to read it and see how many properties are being added, if they're being changed from a GB to a URM, et cetera. You have a zoning map, and then you have an old zoning map.
We have it broken out of all the
You
lots.
have one map that shows both overlaid.
Well, we gotta adjust the one, but yeah, we have the old map to the new. We also have all the lots broken out where they're gonna be from GB to URM or vice versa.
Right, that's
We have that all
narrative.
broken out.
That's narrative, but it's not in a map.
John, you?
We gave you, the maps I brought tonight just show the new and the old, it's not overlaid. We discussed it with you individually, we highlighted those areas,
Yeah,
but.
so people get an idea what's being moved.
I don't think it had street names on it, that was confusing. That colored that, I was trying to get.
Well, typically, unless you're zoning, because the zoning map usually folds and goes into the books, so usually you don't have street names on
Just
there.
trying to find for everything else.
But if you wanted to define, because at the end of the day, really, I want to know, is it there or is it there? I don't want to know it's here. I want to know it's here and here. This is the corner of this zone. It Can you provide that to the village?
Not exactly sure. You're zoning that now shows.
a topic map to show the changes to what's on top. Am I correct?
Oh, the chick, you mean to be,
Yeah, so
What's
let's say,
existing and what's changing right now?
and if Smith is the demarcation point of this to this, can you show Smith? Can you show Lansing? Can you show Albrook? Can you show these things on these maps with the overlay saying, this is where it is, this is where it's not?
I mean, yeah, you
So
could
can
create,
show
you have a
different-
colorized.
Different
Yeah.
regulations.
yeah.
Yes. I mean, there's no, I don't think there's any assist by, let's say, the SR10 that's in the multi-family overlay to show that that's changed, because there's really no change there. But what you're talking about is where there is a substantive, what lots have substantively been changed.
Changed. So when we talk about the folks that, a lot of them are here tonight from the North Main corridor, we're talking about North Main Park, Brooks, Forest. There's a lot going on. Oak, on the other side, I understand has been modified. No, it still remains in the GB?
Can you identify the ones that have changed?
Yeah, we'll give you, if you want, I think we have, but we can put a map together and show
Absolutely.
where
I
it's
think that-
changed.
yeah.
It's not a problem. Yeah, we're good. No problem.
And just to clarify, I don't mean to take, if any of the public wants to take over, it's fine, but I just want to go back a couple of things real quick. So, to be clear, Christine, your point regarding the study that you did with the calculations were based on the 2009 study, and the numbers are accurate to our village for the constitutionality of,
Yeah, the numbers, well, we get the numbers from the building department. Every, the building department keeps track of all the multi-family units in the village.
okay, so percentage-wise, this study did good. Your results, your data, you,
Yeah, our data is good. It's, yeah, it's, I mean, the question that I think, Bonnie's question is the validity of the 2008 housing study, I think in itself. And not that I certainly don't disagree with her at all. It is a study that was done, and I think they say it actually in that particular study, the introduction says, by the way, we're acknowledging that the housing market just crashed, and so this study needs to be read with a grain of salt. But I think that Rick's point, to the fact that a judge is not going to have that planning knowledge, she's just gonna read it and say, this says X and you have Y. And that's the reality of it.
yeah, and listen, I'm not gonna go into the legal or the judge or the constitutionality of it. We're a little village here and we're trying to get along, right? But at the end of the day, when we make determinations, and I did mine, I did a calculation, and that's the reason I asked you a question before Bonnie even arrived here. Remember I asked you, was the data good? You said, yes, I think it's excessive. She's kind of backing that up, so.
You think the target is excessive, or the number of multifamily units that we're reporting is excessive?
You know, the target.
Oh, well, the target is out of the study, the target is in our data.
Right.
But should that study even be,
Utilized based on
if you're
today's.
saying it's
Well,
already,
and my advice to the village is that they be acting at their peril if they ignore it.
if it's obsolete, why is it at their peril? Because they're adding something and saying something about a target which they may not meet now.
Because what happens, I mean, there's lots of things that are obsolete, but if courts believe that it has enough validity that it, we don't have something else. If there's a better study out there, we would use a better study,
I
but
mean, I'll tell you, the town of Monroe, in the baseline analysis, they look at and they acknowledge the 2009 study. But then there are additional data gathered for median sales prices now, assessed values, additional data to support the fact that, you know, while that study exists, the reality is now that we're in 2016.
what
So that would be useful if this 2016 study did the same, the comp plan.
But
Challenging, that's why it's more now.
what happens, I will tell you exactly what happens, I mean, I'm litigating these things. What happens is that if it's not this sort of established study, this tri-county study, courts that will give this imprimatur of acceptedness. And if you want to say, well, that's really wrong, we're going to bring down those numbers by showing you the value of homes here, there, the other place. The other side is going to,
Right. Just
but
whatever. I don't know, because that suggests I'm trying to get it to go someplace. It's
But
just simply
what I'm
updating.
saying is that the other side will now simply focus in on how that additional data is incorrect. The housing changed in the last 6 weeks because of somebody else coming into office, or because there's been a factory put up nearby. Therefore, all that data is meaningless right now. It's all too fluid. I'm telling you, it complicates things tremendously. If a village wants to go ahead and test the waters and have it litigated and be happy to spend all that money, then yes, you can do all sorts of creative things. But if somebody wants to take the most conservative route, this is the more appropriate way to do it. And again, this wasn't something where these numbers were trying to be ginned up, let's get more affordable housing. It was just, we wanted to have a check on what this organic process produced. And the check was, it's fine.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe just ask
Your
you.
name?
Oh, sorry, my name is Dan Margano, resident of the Village of Monroe. Just based, there's some other stuff I want to say for afterwards, but based on what you just said, I just want to sort of repeat it condensed in a sort of simplified version. You tell me if it's correct of what you just said. Basically, even if everybody agrees that the 2009 study is wrong, unless there's another credible study to support it, we should go by that study's guidelines.
No, I can't say that I said it that broadly, because
Okay.
implicit in my
It's going to
response.
be difficult otherwise.
Implicit in my response is that the court is not going to consider that.
Right, it would be difficult otherwise unless there's a credible study refuting it, even if everybody believes it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. The trustee up front asked a question a while ago, and it was answered. There was a couple of maybe mistaken points, not on purpose, about consolidating lots, you wouldn't get any more properties. There actually are 3 specific ones I can think of at least. I know for a fact that if they were consolidated with their neighbor, they would be able to increase by 1 family each. That's, again, you probably meant to be minor. If they all consolidated themselves, the increase of numbers of family would be minor. Because one case actually in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals went to the Supreme Court and didn't have enough square footage, but if it had bought the neighbor's property, the area would have made it in fact allowable to put in a second family, as well as the neighbor's family can still have 2 families. So that's what she was asking, if people could consolidate properties and get more families. Not much more, maybe a couple here and there, that's about it. Not completely no. And also about preventing people from doing that. I actually have the benefit of 20 years working in the design and construction field, so I've seen from Long Island all the way up to Hyde Park, where they've done places, similar things to what you were actually asking about. In the 90s, they did an area of Hyde Park where they didn't want to see these old historical houses knocked down and put in more densely populated buildings. So they actually put a square footage limit on the property before it had to go to an architectural review board. So if somebody wanted to make a large, multifamily structure, well, here it's got to go through a longer process going to an architectural review board. So it made it more difficult for somebody to want to say, hey, let's knock that down and put something larger there. It's not preventative, but it makes the process less appealing to somebody else. And they also put guidelines to that architectural review board of what they have to do with those large size buildings and what they have to make them conform to so they don't make the area look pretty bad. But they had minimum square footage and maximum square footages. So I thought that was really nice. Some people can do that, even though they have multi-family homes, saying after this much square footage for, you have 2 families, if you're going over this square footage, well, there's another process you got to go through. So they're less inclined to knock down or build up more buildings or do larger construction processes. And also there was areas that they, I don't remember if this was Hyde Park or Roundup, but they took an area of land that they wanted to make not rental units, but they were thinking of affordable housing as for people to purchase with all the large homes that were around. They put a maximum square footage of course, now I think it had something to do with price-wise of construction. They kept it at 1,500 square foot. So they kept small lots, houses that were maximum of 1,500 square foot, so they could have, really nice houses, but at an affordable rate in a community of McMansions. So those were some things that their local zoning boards had put into play. They had maximum. And then there was another part of Hyde Park where they actually had minimum square footage, where every house had to be 3,300 square foot minimum. So they kept it in accordance with what was around it. So there was both ends of the spectrum that way. So those are some things that can be done, like minimum square footage and maximum square footage. And like I said, they can be kicked to an architecture review board. But Monroe is the only architecture review board I've ever dealt with, and I've dealt with many of them, dozens, that didn't have a bunch of guidelines set up like a lot of these other places did. So that would have been nice to have seen given to them rather than being dissolved, but to give them more guidelines that they can go by
Right.
and implement them. So that's all I want to say. You're welcome.
Ronnie?
Just to speak of what you were saying, a longer process sounds well and all good, but from what I've heard from this, from the community members, a lot of LLCs own these parcels of land. They have very deep pockets, so they don't care how long their process is. If they can go and tear down a whole structure of buildings, they're going to do that and build it. However, hopefully the zoning is strict enough. What are we going to do about enforcement if we do come up with stricter codes to prevent super, density zone buildings? How is it going to be enforced? Or are we going to have another enforcement officer going around and checking everything? Or, I want to see very strict zoning that would meet the requirements so we're not sued. This community's in enough lawsuits.
Ronnie, you're 100% correct. We are looking at that. But I would let you know, if somebody had put a request in about LLCs, on all these properties that we looked at, there's 135 properties that would exchange in between the zonings. Out of the 135 properties, only 10 of them are LLCs. So there's not as many
But
LLCs.
they own the large parcels, the 12.5 acres behind the captain's table, the X amount across
But
from.
looking at the overall picture, there's a lot of residents that live on North Main, but they're not LLCs. I'm just trying to, that question was sent to us as a request after the public hearing, written in. So out of the 135 properties that would be involved in these zoning changes, only 10 are LLCs. And you're right, Susan, 4 of them are on that one, on that model over
And
there.
they're from New Square, so with all due respect, the housing is high-density housing, that's an exclusive community. It's concerning that we would change it, whereas I don't know why we wouldn't be tightening things up to make it
But
SR
that's,
10 or.
the whole point is whatever we do, it is going to be very strict and it is going to be very well enforced. We're fully aware with the issues that are going on surrounding us.
Not as strict as like what he brought up, I mean, then you're not even, like you even said, like, oh, well, these, the 55 and older senior living is floating, and they don't, James won't tell, well, they didn't want to buy it. You're kind of leaving it up to the developer. Affordable housing is great.
No. Hold on. The developer will follow the guideline.
Right, but if you don't have the guidelines.
We do already, but we do have it already.
What kind
Senior
of?
housing. We have high density, we
Right.
have the size of the buildings, size of the lots, height, all that's already in place in our village code.
Right, but they,
About more specific areas.
yeah,
like
specific areas,
general
floating
areas.
is.
Oh, you know, that's what we're talking about now, correct.
Because, yeah, but if you just leave it all URM, then that's just up to the developer. And you can't guarantee that seniors are gonna live there, or young professionals are gonna live there, or workforce is gonna live there.
Correct.
I mean, nothing's being built that's affordable.
The 2014 plan talks about putting form-based zoning in, having something that was much more visual, that would set forth the design of buildings. And if I recall, the 2016 may have pulled that out. So anything, something that's concerning with the 2016 plan is that if there's a desire to keep a certain aesthetic, or a certain density, or a certain height, and a certain look, having something that's a little more form-based, or these design guidelines, is desirable and should be pulled out of the 2014.
Okay, one more, so we get one right.
And not dissolving the architectural review board, as Bonnie mentioned earlier also. I mean, the gentleman behind me talked about having a process by which an architectural review board reviews and handing it over to the planning board. I don't know that that's a good solution. I've been hearing, sitting back listening, I've been hearing a lot of this has been a process, we've already gone through this process, this is sounding from a few members here that sounds like we've already gone through this. You're too late to the party. You showed up too late. This has already been done. People showed up, you didn't. Well, there's a pretty sizable number of people here today, and I think you probably received a sizable number of emails with concerns about what has been presented with regards to changing SR10s or or general business to URMs. And I think that there is enough concern to perhaps move forward and change direction or revisit this. I do agree that a lot has changed in the last number of years. I've lived here for 9 years and I've seen a lot in 9 years, a lot more traffic, a lot more people. I think that does warrant revisiting that. And with regards to the discussion about looking into or acting on the basis of we have to be careful not to get sued, I think is a terrible way to plan out a village. When I was a alternate member of the planning board in Monroe, I asked a lot of questions. And I asked about Smith Farm when it was coming down the pike, and I was really nervous about it. And I asked questions as to, if this project's been dead for so long, why is it being revitalized and shoved through so quickly when so much has changed over these last 10, 15 years since it was last before the board. And I was told, point blank, we have to worry about getting sued. And I went to a planning requirement learning session. You have to go to a certain amount of hours as a planning board member. And I went to one of these sessions, and the first one I attended was with David Church, the planning commissioner of Orange County. And one of the first things he taught us was, you have the right to say no. You have the right to say no on something that does not coincide with the community character. And that, I walked away with that in my mind thinking, it's okay to say no to a project if it looks like garbage, or if it's not in line with the character of the community. And just a perfect example is Smith Farm. Look at Smith Farm. It looks like a prison is being built there. The walls look like a death trap. And the mudslides and the inconveniences to the stores, it's really a mess. And to have the planning board managing the architectural review going forward when we've got a mess on Gilbert Street like I've never seen before, it's very worrisome for me. And I think that this is worth revisiting, it's worth relooking at. I appreciate the people who stepped up to sit in meetings and create a new comprehensive plan for the village. I think it was time to do it, and I think that's great. I do have a problem with the fact that they were all men. That I have a problem with. I think there should have been women on that committee, but that's another conversation. I hope and I urge the board, and I appreciate the time to have an opportunity to speak, and I hope that the board will consider revisiting this proposed zoning. Thanks.
Tammy, go ahead, Tammy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tammy Rio, Village Monroe. I guess it was basically going to say what Emily had said to the board is that, so now we're at 7:35 and way past the time of what your regular board meeting should have started. And there's, yeah, it's okay, we're all here and it might be an inconvenience, but the point is that this
More
I
discussion
think there
needs
needs
to
to be a harder look from the board members at this proposal, and maybe even a new study, as Bonnie was suggesting. That would be good to see. And John, can you just clear something up for me? Because when you had talked about the UNR on North Main, if I'm looking at it right, the map's a little confusing also because it's not named the street, but if I'm looking at it right, the UMR is also extending to the side streets off of North Main, Anderson Place.
On what, over by, as you go towards Elm, that used to be the GB, yeah, we explained that in the beginning, yes.
Well, it's a little vague, you had said it was North Main, but is it also the side streets, Franklin Park?
Yes, that's what I said, there's a section down that was GB.
No, they're not general business, they're right now, they're zone SR.
SR10 overlay district.
Yeah, I'm not talking about, so that's another question, is the Elm Street, where it's general business mixed use, but if you're going up North Main now towards 208, and you have Anderson Place, which then turns into Elm Street and Oak Street on the left side. On the right side, there's Franklin Park, all of those fingers off of North Main. Will they also be in that UMR? Yeah, sorry.
I double check, I believe they're in the overlay district now.
Yeah, I thought that they were, I just wanted to be clear on it.
Yeah, they're in the overlay district now. The only one we actually added was on the section on Elm, which was GB. We took half the street, but the side that was GB, the residentials we put into the URM. But all the other units there were in the SR10, in the multifamily overlay zone. So we didn't really change our zone. Again, as we discussed earlier, it's just clarifying that everybody knows what they're getting.
So, I'm sorry, I don't understand that in this room, so I just want to be clear, because I'm on Anderson, so there's two houses on Anderson, and we're at SR10, I believe now, but we will be UMR? URM. But as soon as you turn that corner, it turns into Elm Street, it's a mixed-use area. It's a general business mixed-use area, where the residential homes are, and are a few businesses there as well.
Yes.
So that section of Elm will now
Elm,
be...
the section towards North Main Street,
Okay,
basically
yeah.
the homes
Yeah.
would be in the URM. The other side of the street, which is mostly commercial, would stay GB.
Now, there's some homes that are also businesses. They're residential homes, but there will be a business operating out of the garage, or there's
Yeah.
also,
I think there's two, and they would just be pre-existing non-conforming
they're
uses.
grandfathered in.
Mhm.
So so I understand now, and everyone understands, when you say North Main Street, it's not just North Main Street, so we're opening up that whole area, this whole area over here, the fingers off of North Main Street as well, to be,
Just the section along Elm, because before they were in the overlay district as well.
okay, so then,
This is the reason we had the confusion. This is why
Yeah.
the board said, we gotta get rid of this overlay zone, it's too confusing, so now we're
so
gonna...
Brooks, Charlton, Franklin, Ash Street, Oak Street, all of those side streets, if I'm understanding correctly, or looking at the map correctly, they will be...
Oak Street still remains, for example, it's still GB.
Okay, but all those other residential areas will now go from SR10 to URM. Oh,
Yes.
thank you. I'm so tired. It's been a long day.
But they were SR10 in a multifamily overlay district. So the zone, the name changes, what you can do and what you can't do remains the same. So today, if you're in those houses and you wanted to put a multifamily home in, you could.
But if there's already a single-family home there on the lot, you could
Excuse
just, if the home, there's a lot of single-family homes there on that overlay zone. If there's existing single-family homes there, you could just have moved it from an overlay zone with the URM overlay to just an SR10. You could have gone back in that direction instead, but you didn't.
Well, the comp plan didn't, and then at that time, there was a push for multifamily, and there was an issue with not being able to, you can't spot zone. I can't take this lot and say, you're a multifamily, you go to URM, and you're a single family. You have zones, you don't have individual lots.
John, I think if you take a survey of every street that they're talking about, you find the majority of those parcels privately single-family homes.
Yep.
You would.
Yeah.
Take my word for it.
You would.
You would.
That's
Okay,
fine.
so let's assume that. Based on that, these folks are saying, hey, listen, I have a business on Elm Street. So based on what you just said to Ms. Rao, that if she came down Anderson and we make the right turn and we're looking up Elm Street, I interpreted what you said as a left of Elm could continue as a GB.
Yes, facing the rest of the village, yes. I'm not sure which way you say going.
Okay, well, Anderson's here, if I turn this way, the pond's here. So this side of Elm, the pond side of Elm,
GB.
GB. How far up GB?
All on Elm, the whole way.
Okay, because
That's all residential.
that's all residential, currently.
Once you get past Ash
It's
Street.
just GB.
Okay, got it. The right side of Elm, from the Anderson Anderson right turn all the way up to the other end is also or now becoming proposed URM. It wasn't GB. It could be multifamily overlay or original SR10.
That would be URM.
Just so we also clarify, in the URM, are you allowed commercial? To build commercial?
No.
I read it as a special permitted use, so it was kind of clarified.
Trustee, so the URM is the uses you can use. Ambulance, bed and breakfast, community recreation, conversion of existing residential to multifamily, conversion of existing residential to two-family, fire protection service, mobile home park, multifamily residential, one-family detached, public utility structure, religious assembly, townhouse condo, two-family detached dwelling. Those are the uses either permitted or special permit required in the URM zone.
Okay. So no further commercial development can be had in the URM.
Correct.
Okay. So I do
Again,
have,
the point was is when we had any commercial in that area, people would complain because they were in a residential area even though it was zoned GB.
but historically, I mean, that's a really unique neighborhood right there. I mean, those are family businesses from the 40s and so forth, and Columbia Yard was a coal business in the 1800s and on, and they've since morphed into other business uses. But there are still predominantly residential units on that block and on the other side of North Main as well. Through whatever things have changed, and I think the concern is that we're looking to see what is that URM. I know we keep hearing that the overlay means the same as this, and it's going to be the same thing, and nothing's changing. And I heard the mayor say something earlier, which I probably should ask him to clarify, when we talked about eliminating something or the concern of something, and I just want to clarify that. I'm not sure what that is. Can you maybe touch on that?
Remember what I said?
Okay, I don't, honest to goodness, I don't, but I do remember there was an elimination, because when I first came on the board, that was in fact one of my major concerns. And in the SR 10 and 20, and
Oh, the elimination of, you can take your single family home, tear it down, make it a two-family, just do it to a building.
okay.
That we looked at part of our,
And just,
one of our laws to change.
right, and just if I could, just ask on the both tables, on the proposed both tables, on the SR 20, the maximum lot coverage is 20%. Yeah. But on SR 10, it's 50%.
Well, SR10 is a much smaller lot and higher density, typically in your village. So the SR20, you have to have 20,000 square feet.
Great, and 10,000 on the SR 10.
So you have a much smaller lot, so that if you only could have 20% coverage on that small lot, you couldn't fit a house.
Right.
So that's why it's a greater percentage. The SR20 is the big expansive lots, big lawns. The SR10, you don't, and that's what you're pushing for the SR20. In the SR10, you don't have the room to have that 20%. So
You
that's
can
why
still fit a house on that, on 10,000 square feet.
Yes, that wasn't the question. He's talking about percentage of lot coverage.
Right. But
I'm talking about calculations.
Yeah, so if you took an SR20 and you had 50% lot coverage, all right? But if you took 50% and put it into an SR10, so basically you can only develop 5,000 square feet of that, which is a little tight. So that's why the percentage, I believe, was very respectable.
So John, somebody put a trailer, 12 by 70 trailer on our house? I mean, is that something that we want? Do we want someone taking a 10,000 square lot and sticking?
Well, that's not changing it, that's what you have now. If you have a...
I understand. Maybe it's something we should look at.
Maybe we should change it. Well, if you want to, what, no more trailer parks in the village, I'd defer to the attorney, but that's... There's certain things you can do. Can you take an empty lot and just put a trailer on it? No. You have to go through the building permit process, but you have to.
The zoning board,
Yeah.
Yes. Bob O'Neill, Village of Monroe. Just putting aside the concern about getting sued and the affordable housing, somebody mentioned grandfathering, and I'm just wondering, the concern seems to be in the North Main corridor, preserving it more as a single-family home neighborhood with, you know, recognizing that there's already multifamily homes in there. Can you flip that around and make it clear to people on the zoning to revert it back to SR1 and grandfather in the usages as multifamily?
If the board and the comprehensive plan came up with that or come up with a new one,
I was just wondering if that was something that...
Again, this is all based upon recommendations going over several years with all the public input, and that was what the public input is we want multifamily. Yes, we need multifamily in the village, we need young families, we need seniors. Where does it go? Well, North Main Street is where it generally is now, so that would be a good place just to clarify.
Right. And what I'm boiling this back to is all those concerns from the comprehensive plan are based on a study that I don't think anybody would argue is based on data from before a major...
No.
It wasn't.
I think we need to clarify that.
The plan that was come up, they weren't looking at the housing needs study. That they weren't looking at that.
Okay.
Like I said before, there was this organic plan from this comprehensive plan group, and it came up with, this is what we would like to see. There was no discussions, oh, do we have enough affordable housing? Oh, have we looked at the needs study? They didn't do that at all. It was only at the end of that process that I and Kristen were asked to look at it to make sure so that the village didn't enact something that somebody'd say, wait a second, that's a violation. We wanted to make sure. So we looked at it and it was fine. So that's all the analysis with respect to the affordable housing component, was just to make sure that what had come about, regardless of that, was okay.
Yes, Dan.
Just a quick question. Was there any other areas that you looked at to try to satisfy those affordable housing needs, or did you just think that, or did everybody think that North Main just seemed like the most logical place to look at?
Okay. You know what,
There was a couple, as I said, as mentioned earlier, there was a couple sections, trailer park was taken into account, the textile place was placed into account in the existing, so that was about it.
Well, those are much smaller areas considering all of North Main, right?
Yeah, well, in North Main, they just took the existing overlay district and said it's there now, it seems to work, we'll keep it there. Walking distance to the village. Now, I should clarify, there was one URM that was taken out, which is Hope Lane. That used to be a URM. Existing single-family homes there, matches the SR10, so that was proposed to be converted back, actually not back, but to an SR10. So there was a little give and take throughout the entire village, trying to match what was there to update the zone.
I feel embarrassed. Hope Lane, I've lived there 40 some odd years. Where is that?
next to Sacred Heart.
Next to Sacred Heart Church, they call the second through there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't realize it was Hope Lane, sorry. And the last thing I was going to say is, just from my hearing,
It's
Hope.
Oh, that's what he said.
Hope
Lane.
So I thought you said Hope.
Yeah, so did I.
I heard Hope, sorry, that's what I was speaking. Okay. Just from listening to everybody at this meeting, and including other meetings in the past, one of the problems I see that arises a lot is that through the planning process, a lot of people are unaware of a lot of things that are happening through the master planning and planning stages. So we get to a stage like this where everybody's voicing their opinions and have no knowledge of what has happened before, and it makes it very difficult for them to understand, why we got to this point at this stage in the program, so to speak. And I just want to bring up the fact that the last month I was at the Orange County sponsored the actual master plan workshops that they had, and one of the things that I can just tell you right now that they were talking about was there's actually a website that provides a forum, a place to do projects for municipal projects as well as master planning online, so people can see it, see what's going on, look at maps and make comments without actually having to come to every single meeting if they can't make every meeting. And at least at stages of this, they can go back to that website and see what's happened in the past and what the process was up to now, and they can look at these maps and zones and areas and look at it. And that might be just something the board might want to consider in doing. I'll give you an email, Mr. Purcell, Mayor, about the website. The first project is for free for any municipality, but from there on, you just pay a fee for posting services for projects that go on. And that might be something we might kind of consider so people can have more of a information for these plans.
All right,
You're welcome.
Mayor, I did have one comment, one question I raised. It was spoken about, I actually had it in my notes with regard to the AARB. What body decides that the AARB is in existence or it's disbanded, as suggested in this rezoning? Okay. Thank you.
And just to clarify, it's expanded, but the powers were given to the planning board. So basically, it's eliminating the board. The planning board in the architectural review board.
Okay, the need is there, it's just a matter of who process.
That would have been
It's a very common practice around this area, for planning boards that act as architectural review boards as well. Because there's sometimes a problem, because it advise municipalities in both types, when you have a separate ARB. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but there are problems when you have a separate one, in trying to coordinate between the two. You know, I think one of the reasons that many municipalities go with the combined powers in a single board is to sort of have a more coherent view of what's going on, both as to design and architectural elements, as well as the planning process. Because sometimes you adjust things in the planning process, we adjust things in the planning process that have an impact on design.
Actually, I served in that board, the ARB, and one of the biggest challenges that board probably had then, when I was on it, probably still continues now to have, is the application of the zoning that's required in the ARB's guides or oversight. And I know there were many times when there was confusion, and there was things between the building department and the ARB where sequence that happened in right order. I think, to your point, I don't disagree about consolidation and stuff like that. It's a fluid. But I also think that if you can imagine the planning board sitting right here as a member board, and the ARB sitting right there, they can still work cohesively. It's just a matter of the application. These folks, and I can tell you this when I was on the board, didn't have a good handle on processing the zoning as it currently played out. So,
The ARB has to be supported, because you can have an architect, the town of Tuxedo and the village of Tuxedo Park have separate boards. But they can also have their own consultants, and they can also get assistance and have design guidelines to help them in the process. So that's half the battle. So, and it is done both ways, absolutely, because there is some communities who are streamlined, but you know, my initial question is just simply, this is supposed to be flowing from a comprehensive plan, and there's no mention of, getting rid of an ARB. Instead, the original 2014 plan said, let's implement some design guidelines, and instead went into direction. So, from my perspective, what's the basis for that?
right. Okay.
I'm sorry, but I gotta
That's
do
okay,
this. I'm sidetracked. John, to address you again, when you were saying that in the overlay zone, nothing's really essentially changing, whatever you could do before, you could do now under this new zoning. Did I hear that right? I'm in that overlay.
You're in the overlay district zone now.
Yeah, I
Okay.
am. And I actually spoke to the building inspector about 2 years ago, and I was told that I was considering having my mother move in with me, but my house could be mother-daughter. It's not being used that way, and I wanted to know from him if I could legally do that. And he said I could make it a mother-daughter. I don't know the wording.
Accessory apartment.
Accessory
Maybe
apartment?
that's what you're referring
Okay.
to, yes.
That I could do that, but I would have to get special permitting, go in front of the planning board, etc. When I'm to sell that house, I have to then rip that out and change it back to a single family. So under the new zoning, I could,
Not exactly.
let's say
You're-
I
you're-
wanted to
You're
make it
confusing,
two-family,
you're
I could.
confusing, there's a confusion over two things. There's multifamily and accessory apartment. Accessory apartment you can have in the SR10, the SR20.
Okay.
And those regulations, basically, if you go back and look at it, is, again, to keep people living in the village. They said sometimes seniors can't afford it, so you can have an accessory apartment. As a requirement, yes, you go in front of the planning board, and you have to, basically, you have to live there yourself. And you
Right.
can have an accessory apartment. When you go to sell it, you don't necessarily have to rip everything out, but the new owner
Had to
has to
apply
go-
for those
has to
permits.
apply
or
for
that-
those permits
And had to
again.
be approved, otherwise I would have to.
Yes.
Right, that's
That-
right, I remember that. Okay.
So that's anywhere in the village.
Okay.
The multifamily, if you would ask, if you lived in the multifamily overlay and say, I wanted to put in a two-family or a multifamily house, he would have said yes.
Okay.
But that's a little slightly different than a mother-daughter or accessory
Gotcha.
apartment.
And then if,
No. Accessory apartments are, if you have a single-family home, I believe that you can still get the accessory apartment. I would defer, because I don't know off the top of my head.
2 years ago.
It's not here.
And then, the
Okay,
wording.
so then they took that out.
No accessory apartment URM, take it out.
And just one other thing that I wanted clarification on, I was reading through, skimming through the document, it had something about allowing group homes and something else in that North Main area. What does that mean, and why is that wording in there?
A group home?
Yeah, it said it was allowable for group homes and there was something else.
It's, I'm looking at the bulk table for the URM, and it's,
It wasn't showing a group home on the map, it was saying in the wording that it would be allowable to have a group home, and I don't want to misspeak, but there was another type of non-residential, regular residential type of thing that would be allowed in that area.
I'm sorry, existing or proposed?
No, that it would be allowed going forward under this new zoning.
Where was this county you saw?
It was in the, was it the comprehensive
It was on the
plan?
comprehensive plan, there was something else, there were like 4 different things. So I don't want to say group home, but it did say something odd.
I can look, but looking at the URM zone, there's nothing that says group home in the bulk table. So whether it was in a discussion someplace, I can go through.
I think that maybe that wasn't in the comprehensive plan, maybe I'm directing my question to the wrong person, sorry.
No problem.
Okay.
So if the board could look at that and, I don't know, I'll be here again next time and I'll ask again. I'm just curious what it was, I just wondered why that wording was there.
We can look at that. Also, with respect to group homes,
Yes.
it's,
I don't even understand what group home means necessarily, it's kind of vague, but.
what group homes are, is that there are various homes for the mentally challenged and other disabilities and other things in which they group people together in group homes. They are
And
mostly...
there is one on Brooks, right by North Main Street
Yes,
School,
I
so.
just heard that. They actually are their own special category, and it's actually very difficult under state law not to have them virtually anywhere that they would want to have them. So we'll look at why it says in one particular area. But they have their own set of rules where much zoning is relaxed with respect to that by virtue of state law, not by virtue of your local zoning code.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. All right, we'll take a 5-minute recess. We'll start our board meeting at 8:10. Thank you, everybody, for your input. Appreciate it. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, minutes for November 1st, Dwyer, myself, and Chan were present. So does anybody have any changes the minutes from November 1st. I'll call the question. Trustee Chan? Trustee Dwyer? Trustee Conklin? Carried. Next, November 15th meeting. Everybody was there. Any changes or deletions to the minutes? Need a second?
I'll second.
Okay, call the question. Trustee Chan? Trustee Dwyer? Trustee Berenger? Trustee Conklin? Carried. Special meeting on November 22nd. Trustee Dwyer, Berenger, Conklin, present, the mayor. Need a motion, excuse me, is any changes, deletions to the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
A second?
Second.
Call the question. Trustee Dwyer? Trustee Berenger?
Aye.
Trustee Conklin?
Aye.
So carried. Okay, next, Orange County Tourism Grant Application submittal. Be resolved, the Board of Trustees authorize Deputy Clerk Ann Margaret Baxter to make application for funding through Orange County Tourism Grant Program 2016-17 to be applied towards the fees paid to musicians who perform at the summer concert series in Grand Park. I need a motion?
Take that motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Call the question. Trustee Chan? Trustee Dwyer? Trustee Berenger?
Aye.
Trustee Conklin?
Aye.
So carried. Next, Trustee Dwyer, equipment disposition Panasonic digital video from the PD. No, I apologize, it's Village Hall. I apologize. Be it resolved, Board of Trustees declare the following items as surplus. Surmise the Panasonic digital video camera recorder model number AG-DVC CP serial number T00016. So I need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Second with discussion.
You.
So, that unit was given to us as part of an agreement with Cablevision, right? And the unit hasn't even been created to be used. And I'm not quite sure if the technology is still not viable for this village's use. We typically, other than tonight or late, had anybody videoing us, and I think it's a tremendous asset to have that tool. So I would like to see maybe the board or maybe the village clerk or somebody reach out to somebody and say, is this technology, can it be utilized? And if so, how? And I suggest that we get this all in this boardroom.
Yes, you can, Trustee Chan.
Clerk, town clerk, Janine Carey showed it to me. I'm going to the Monroe School District, where the woman is the big one. She's the cat table. And you should buy me. So you know, so I've been down that path.
Yeah. Wow.
But I agree with you that we should at least
I mean,
get that.
all right, so I don't have the expertise, I don't know if anybody in the audience does. It has a certain format, I don't know if it's a tape or it's a digital.
Tape.
Small tape,
It's a
right?
small tape.
And is that taking the tape out of the equation, but plugging in some sort of port to it, hardwiring it to something? Can it be digitized? Can it be?
We need to buy a more up-to-date camera. I did look into it, I started to, but I didn't have the budget, so I was going to see what it would cost to hire someone to do that. Professionally, and count on them and not have to worry about somebody who does it for a living.
This room was pre-wired for it.
Yes.
Yep.
It was part of the cable franchise we were negotiating.
Right.
So the next time that's up, you can probably get all the cable companies and take the camera for nothing.
We did talk to Frontier, that wanted to come in here at one point.
Volunteers come back to us.
And they have, so I guess we could reach out to Cable Vision and see what they're willing to do for us.
All right, well, I think Trustee Chan will take care of that, and we'll just get rid of this equipment, make it obsolete. So, Paul? Yes, sir.
If you just wanted to evaluate it, I've been in the cable television business, I'm retired now for over 40 years and built cable systems and dealt with cable television and many others. I'll do a quick evaluation for you and let you know
On the camera?
on the camera.
Good, that would work.
Okay, so right now, then we'll,
So after the meeting, we'll...
Thank you.
so then, let the motion die and move on. Huh? Okay, next. Moving disposition, police department office equipment.
Yes, please. On a memo from Chief David Conklin. I'm requesting the following equipment be taken off our department inventory. Epson printer WP4540, Dell Optiplex 390, second Dell Optiplex 390 Dell monitor, second Dell monitor, third Dell monitor, each has their own model and serial number. HP monitor S2331 and a Dell Optiplex 390. I thank you in advance for your consideration of this request. Respectfully submitted to Chief David Compton. I'd like to put that in form of a motion that we accept these items.
Need a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Call question, trustee Chan. Aye. Trustee Dwyer.
Aye.
Trustee Berenger.
Aye.
Trustee Conklin. So carried. Next, appointment zoning board of appeals, Gennaro
Marticelli.
Monticelli. All right, be resolved that the board advertised for the vacancy of zoning board of appeals created by the resignation of Frank Minarelli when he moved to Middletown, New York. One response was received by Mayor Purcell as recommended. Gennaro Monticelli to fill the vacancy. Term will be a 5-year term from 12/12/16 to 12/20/21. So need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second. Wait. Discussion. Call question, trustee Chan. Trustee Dwyer. Trustee Berenger. Trustee Conklin.
Aye.
So carried. Congratulations, Gennaro.
Jerry Marticelli.
Jerry, you're fixing the wall on Mill Park. Thank you. Water penalty waiver request, account number 1499. We had the opportunity to review this report that was submitted.
Is that the big
The
house?
big one. That's the one that's like a
Is it this one?
Canada encyclopedia.
No, this one. You have two of them. The other one. It's like 65 pages long, excuse me.
You can have one to-
You guys can share that. That's why I don't share that.
This is the property that's 7 p.m. Discussed at the last meeting. This is the report. You guys follow up.
Okay. Account 1499 is asking to waive the penalties. I just paid the principal.
Again, I don't think they ever specifically asked for something specific, just consideration of leniency.
They didn't break out what they wanted.
No, I think we specifically asked.
We've been down the road before.
Yes.
Yes, if you look at the last payment period, pretty chronologically out there. Sorry?
Is he here with us?
No. No.
Who's her last name?
Discussed at the last meeting.
Last one.
We need more information.
This was a family property.
Yes.
Well, that's why we have this meeting, there's more information requested, we want to know the last billing period, when they paid, were they delinquent, what was their, basically, their MO, what they were doing with their accounts. The property owners are not here tonight.
So I'm going to pay it.
Well, we can turn on the front page.
The history of the
Paragraph number 3.
I'm going to make a motion we table it and speak to the homeowner and find out what they want. I'm not going to do anything to them.
I had a question.
Go ahead. Well, somebody second the motion, and
Yeah, sure, I'll second the discussion.
Yes. Thank you.
So based upon the lack of information as to what the ratepayer desires,
correct.
it's obviously some sort of concession or some sort of modification to the bill.
Correct.
Do we need to, without her input, consider anything?
mean considering by taking no action, or?
By taking
By
action.
taking action.
Well, I guess to me, the issue would be, she could provide you with a very detailed request to the attorney. If the decision of the majority is going to be no, why would you go on? I don't know where the board is on this, but
Yeah.
we discussed this time and time again, as
Yep.
far as
Yep. Yep.
creating precedent. You need to be careful, limited circumstances. I don't know if they meet this with the information they've given you, regardless of the element.
Right. And based on what we have, she will have.
That's,
So,
you could render a decision now and leave it open if you feel that more information might change that, or just, again, that's a question for you.
Yeah, I think you need to read the last paragraph. Well, second to last paragraph.
the account.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what.
Yeah, I'm gonna change the motion, that we deny this. And the second.
Any discussion? Call question, trustee Chan.
Aye.
Trustee Dwyer.
Aye.
Trustee Herringer. Trustee Conklin. So carried. Next, penalty waiver request account 10021, trustee Chan.
Yes, the gentleman bought a house on foreclosure, and that time of closing, I don't know for what reason, there was no final payment from the previous owner. He paid the bill with the penalty, he's asking that we waive the penalty. And either refund it or we'll take it as a credit, but I think if we're gonna do it, then we refund it. So I make a motion that we refund the penalty fees to the homeowner.
And I'll second that.
68801. Dollar amount. Okay, discussion?
Yes, please. So, the bank that would have sold this property, I assume it was a bank, would have done a municipal report? Final readings and...
We're talking about the purchasers
It
of the bank?
was a foreclosure.
Foreclosure.
Right.
Yeah, the gentleman had a foreclosure, he claimed that the bank didn't do a final reading on the previous one. And then when that water turned on, he got stuck to the bill plus penalties.
It's a town account. So there's no way of us levying on the tax bill to get the money back, because we can't do that in town accounts.
But
And when he was driving, it should have been done by the bank.
their responsibility. Let's go for free, go with that.
Well, you have to look at the contract terms.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that.
You can't presume that that's not an absolute.
Okay.
So very often with foreclosed properties, you're buying subject to many different things, violations, municipal building violations, liens. So in those instances where I don't represent a buyer, I tell them very early before you sign the contract,
Right.
it would behoove you to go do your homework, look for any violations against the property, check, because this contract puts all that onus on you. Normally it does not. It would be the buyer's responsibility under most circumstances. Bank-owned properties oftentimes make zero representations. Condition of the house, somebody living in the house, liens, violations, all that stuff.
But in this 2-year period, yeah, I hate it, but in the 2-year period, if, let's say, the water goes unpaid, at some point it had to be shut off, evidently there was something going on here, because nobody lived there. So there must have been an event where it accrued a lot of usage. And then I guess finally, at some point, I'm assuming that this water was shut off. And then that stopped the clock insofar as the usage, but not the penalties, just kept occurring. But wouldn't the village have then re-levied these water bills?
You can't levy town accounts against village taxes. The only way we have to get is payment or shut them off, and the way we get paid by the town accounts is when we shut them off. This was shut off just before Brian left in June.
That's the reason he paid it too.
Right, he came in and paid it because he was having to work in the house and move in. Could have been squatters there, could have been anything going on in the interim. At the end of the day, he bought the bill, he bought the house. That's just the way it is. We can't levy anything against it to get recouped on that, on whoever the previous owner was on a town account or existing town accounts. The only way we get our money is when we shut the town account off, and that's when we get paid.
Okay, so, all right, so let me ask a rhetorical question. So what happens given the climate, the foreclosures are still an issue today. On town accounts in particular, where you can't do what you just said. What do we do? What does the village have as recourse? I mean, if this water is just running 4 billion gallons, how do we deal with this problem as a village? We're losing the asset because we don't have a tool or a mechanism to deal with this. I'm not saying it happens every day, I'm just saying it's happened and it may happen again. And if this mechanism, if this tool there isn't a tool for us to be able to deal with this, I'm asking,
We turn the water off.
We turn water off, yeah. When we don't get paid, we turn water off. And there were two billing cycles to go through.
but this is 2 years. I don't know when the water event happened, when they got turned over to anything else.
Yes, it got turned off and it should be in July.
Oh, 16?
Yeah, but this year.
This year.
Right. So,
It went through 2 billing cycles before it was turned off.
right, but the accruals began on August 14th.
Yes.
So this is almost 23 months. No actions were taken. I'm just saying,
Water was turned off and then they incurred penalties for lack of payment.
right, but the usage was such that those penalties were significant. I'm just saying, why didn't we
Turn it off 2 years before.
Can't answer that? So, I'm just hypothetically asking, what mechanism do we have, or what should be considered? I don't know the policy.
The policy is, it's two billing cycles in term.
So, short of 23 months,
Sure, we just turned it off.
so 17 months, they got use of this water. Somebody did, or there was an event where the water was just being wasted, and the village is going to incur the cost of it. That's all I'm asking.
Well, this is,
No, these are
The village was made to see it.
paid in full. He just wants to
No, no, I agree, but he paid when?
Recently.
recently.
Right.
Paid all this.
When he bought the house.
When he bought the house.
Exactly. No,
Foreclosure, the house was in foreclosure, there was an outstanding bill.
The water was off in order for him to get water in and pay the bill.
He wanted to turn the water on, and he was told that there was an outstanding amount of $688.01.
In penalty.
That's just, that's the,
It's over
it's the
$2,000.
penalties. The bill was $2,000.
$2,013.99.
He's only asking for the penalties that accrued.
Right.
So, each month.
right. So if somebody leaves the house, the penalties have been accruing since August the 14th.
Correct.
2 years later, even more, 27 months later, he comes in and pays the principal balance of 2013.39, right?
Yeah.
He wants a credit against that of 688.01, just to stop the machine from ticking off more penalties. He's asking for that credit back over the amount that he already paid. I'm saying, if the water is shut off after 2 cycles, we read the meter from August 14, we read it again in September 14, and then again in January 15.
And it accrues,
No.
Go
If
ahead.
the 2 cycles is not being paid, it's supposed to be shut off.
but it's still accruing a late fee because you didn't pay the bill.
I'm not concerned about the late fee, I'm concerned about the water that was wasted and not paid for.
Well, he's paid for it.
No.
He's paid for it. But had he, right, but
So
had,
what I'm trying to say is, the water department is turning off after the 2 cycles.
right, so in my personal world, my water bill is $92 per quarter. If I don't pay in 2 cycles, it's $184. I leave my house, I abandon it. New owner comes in, 10 years from now, his bill is what?
Whatever the accrual is, plus,
The principal
You're
of $187, not 2013, with usage of probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 100,000 gallons? I don't know what the heck is that, out of town rate. That's all I'm saying. That's my. I'm just saying that there should be a tool here. This should be something that we should be aware of, that we need to deal with, that we didn't deal with yet.
Well, that's for a different conversation. Let's
All right.
worry about,
I said rhetorical.
taking care of the bill. What we want to do with this customer's bill. The discussion for the water department and liaison. Okay, so do we want to waive the penalties at the motion?
I'd like to have a bank history. I'd like to have a closing history, some documentation to see how this was addressed. council has suggested that we don't know the terms under which this property was transferred. So I'm asking, let's find out what those terms were, and let's see in fact if somebody missed something. But at the end of the day, the purchaser's bank had to say, you know what, here's the $200,000, here's your house. Good luck.
Well, just to be clear, if we're presuming this buyer took out a mortgage, the bank is going to want to have what's called a lender's policy, making sure there's no liens against the property as a matter of record. They may get a clean policy that doesn't pick up an outstanding work, I don't know. But technically, if that came up as part of a title search, that would have had to have been addressed by the buyer at closing before the bank actually gave him the money. It was a lien against the property. So the question is, as part of a municipal search and a tax search, would this get turned out or the title report first? My comment to you earlier was contractually, when I signed a contract 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks prior with the bank, the contract terms may have said, I buy subject to everything. Most arm's length transactions don't have that. You're buying, but the seller's supposed to take care of the liens and all that. I don't know what that contract said.
It says here in his statement, I understand that I'm partly responsible for this mistake. When I did my municipal search buying a home, this slipped through the cracks because it's a village building, the property is in the town. So this bank can pick up on it.
So, the bottom line is there's $1,338 water usage bill that you pay. Plus you paid $688.01 penalty fees. What he's asking for is the refund of the penalty fees.
If he wants the village to waive the accruing penalties that he was not technically responsible for.
But he paid for the outstanding water.
But he does acknowledge the fact that he did his normal municipal search, and this slipped through the cracks, as he said.
Yes. Correct me if I'm wrong, any usage of water is not responsibility, whether it's a few gallons or X amount of gallons on the owner of the property. Means it's a usage, whether a pipe breaks or not, there's thousands of gallons, correct? That's correct. So, it's a usage of water that that person is responsible for.
But again, he's asking for you to consider waiving the penalty. So it's not usage.
Correct. I'd say he's paid for the usage. We're asking for a request for the waiver of that. So, the motion on the floor is, like, correct, the waiver of the penalty, right?
Correct.
Any more discussion?
I don't necessarily agree with that. I'll tell you what, I really think off the record there.
Anything else? The others? Anything else? All right, so I'm going to call the question. Trustee Dana? Aye. Trustee Dubire?
No.
Trustee Berenger?
Aye.
Trustee Conklin?
Aye.
So carried. Next, 424, 434 North Main Street Planning Board fee waiver. Be it that Joel Mann and Nathan Brock, owners of 42434 North Main Street, submitted a conceptual site plan proposing a commercial building on the properties known as 424, 430, and 434 North Main Street, which is currently located in the village's GB zoning district. Once made aware of the pending changes to the village comprehensive plan and zoning map, they realized that their initial proposed plans may be drastically changed and it is unpractical and uneconomical to proceed until the village has finalized its comprehensive plan and zoning map. Mr. Mann and Mr. Brock are requesting that they be refunded the monies paid to the village planning board for several village mandatory fees in the amount of $5,341. So I need a motion to return the gentleman's money, $5,341. So I need a motion. Irene has the copy. Has my copy.
Mr. Mann,
Yes. The man's right here.
just clarify, Chris, would you please, the property that we're talking about, the property that.
Property location on what?
Location is like next to the building, Mombasa Fire Department on 4 North Main Street, that's Cornwall.
On
There is,
site.
no, it's on North Main Street, they just across the exit, gas station,
The White House?
the White House.
The White House is in front of the copy center, correct?
Yeah, in front of the Capitol Center.
Oh, that's
Location.
the attorneys,
There is a-
Carol
With the attorney that's next to the, next to exit realty.
That's the property.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's right on GB.
Is it, if I'm looking at the attorneys, is it to the left? Just-
It's
so
Jesse's
Jesse
old house.
House.
Jessica, yes,
Yeah.
that's here.
Thank you.
Yes, you want to read that? I'm sorry.
The four-story copies.
It's only big, because we might be changing that, that's a second, we change the URL.
Is it something that changed your name? Is this?
No, it's still GB. Sure, that's exactly that. It's currently GB.
Proposed to be UR.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
This is that proposed.
Don't you take that?
I did two slides. I said it was GB.
It's too good, what's it gonna be?
If
We don't know yet.
we don't, we really don't know because
That's what I'm
we're,
saying, it's premature.
exactly, but it's proposed. What's country doing now?
Well, Mark, first of all, I'm not really too sure what village mandatory fees holding a lump sum of $5,341 to the planning board is. My suggestion is I would get an account from the planning board. Okay. But unless those are fees paid into escrow, that would be refunded if you withdraw the application. Otherwise, like any other application, there's certain costs that you have to pay. when you submit applications to a board. If you decide to subsequently pull that application away for whatever reason, doesn't mean the fees come back unless it was an escrow deposit. So I really can't tell from this letter. So if you have something else, I will gladly.
What we can do is we can table it. We have a meeting, yeah, the fees that we would pass, we'll
I make a motion to
table till the next meeting, we'll meet next week. All right, Mr. Mayor, we're meeting on the 20th, we'll get any attorneys you want, we'll take it from there, Robert, just get the information to the attorney. Okay? Thank you.
Do you want mine, Scott, so we can have it?
Is that the?
It's the same, that's what you just read.
No, take it one.
Here's yours.
Okay. Okay. Moving on, next, bond release request for Hidden Creek. Be it resolved, the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the village engineer, Lincoln Tully, and John Moore, the building department, to release performance bond letter of credit held by the village in the amount of $322,560. Original LC number 2518 expiring 1817, issued by Sterling National Bank for the account of Hidden Creek condominiums, 5 Eastview Road, Muncie, New York, Sterling National. So they're looking to that bond, actually sent back $322,560. Need a motion?
Make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Call question, trustee Chan? Trustee Dwyer?
Aye.
Trustee Berenger? Trustee Conklin? So carried. Next, bond reduction request, Woodrow Estates, Presswood Gardens, be it resolved. The board accept the recommendation of the village engineer, Lincoln Tully, John Moore, PE, for a bond reduction in the amount of $432,676.08 for Woodrow Estates, Presswood Gardens. Bond amount was for $632,473.70. $432,000 to be the work completed, which will leave a bond remaining balance of $200,058.62.
Make the motion.
You second?
I'll second it.
Discussion?
Please.
Yes.
So this is for infrastructure, this is as, just describe to me, John, please, the bond that we're holding for this project.
Sure. Long history because it's been around for a while, but he bonded the entire project, and as he gets certain aspects completed, he asked for that money back. So this money related to the improvements that he did on Reynolds Road, where it's reconfigured across the line. So this money is for that. He's completed that work, it's been accepted by the village, so he's asking for that money back. The remaining money is basically, he has one additional cul-de-sac that he's still doing work on. There's some pavements, some catch basins, some water surfaces, some sidewalks. So the remaining $200,000 and change would cover that cost if he walked away from the project.
Let me just step back, Reynolds Road, what specifically are we considering giving him back for that work? What is that inclusive, Reynolds Road work? Like the detention ponds, what is?
The detention pond was part of it, the reconfiguration, the drainage pipe underneath Reynolds Road, the reconfiguration of Reynolds Road, the repaving of it, the sidewalk, street trees, sidewalk between his new cul-de-sac and the existing Woodrow Estates. So it's broken down. So when he first comes with the project, he has a list of, let's say, 1,000 things that he has to do upon that. So as he goes through, we say, okay, that's completed, that's completed, that's completed.
And
It's completed, he gets that dollar amount, and then he gets that back. And the whole time we're doing this, we're also holding 10% of all work completed just to cover the warranty and the maintenance periods as well.
So he currently has, we are holding 632, and we're going to release back to him
432.
Because
So $30,676.
majority of the work is done.
Leave us 10%, which is $200,058, which should be sufficient to cover the remaining work.
Now, two things. First off, the paving, is the paving included in that site work, finished paving?
The paving he's done, he gets that money back. The paving he hasn't done, we're holding back money on.
Okay, so is his project, there's an existing section, I'll pull phase one, I don't know if that's true or not, but that section that's there and people are living in.
That's been done for a long time. That money's been
So that's
returned.
finished?
Yes.
So the areas where we're holding for, say, the finish of the asphalt and whatnot are in the second phase area here.
Correct.
So dollar value wise, I guess what you're saying, based on this breakout, that what we've got, that we're holding in escrow, is going to cover all that, should he walk away,
Yes.
and the remaining balance of those items.
So the work that was done on Monroe Road was about $400,000.
I'd have to go back and check, there might have been some other things.
But that makes sense, that's what you're
Yeah.
talking about, right?
Yeah, it was a large portion of the work, realigning that road.
Okay, now, there was a conversation I'd like to ask about between the developer and a homeowner on that road.
That's correct, we did get a copy of that email, we contacted the owner, they contacted the homeowner, they've agreed to a mutual agreement of what worked. We got an email from the homeowner saying that he was satisfied and very happy with taking care of the project, and he signed off on it.
So he has, are you here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Has the work been done?
No, we agreed that it would be, done in April, in spring of next year.
And that was based on what, the conversation, or was it in writing?
Yes, I don't believe, well, he mentioned it in an email, Mr. Epstein. But we understood it was just gonna happen in the spring of next year. He's going to topsoil the front up to a point.
Yep.
And he's, he said just let him know when we want him to come over and do that.
All right, so you agreed, and he's in writing telling you what you've agreed upon.
An email, sounds like an email.
Yeah, but I
Send
don't
an
think we
email.
actually, I don't think we actually said all that.
Something formal. Something formal.
No, it's not like a formal
I get an email from
agreement,
her saying that everything was.
Yeah, we did with her.
Yeah.
but it was like a verbal agreement.
I understand.
Well, I'm just,
In
This is getting-
either case, we're holding sufficient money,
Right.
for some reason he hasn't done it, that you would have money to cover that area. But it was basically some additional topsoil seeding, haying, maintenance.
I imagine that would have been part of the site plan work, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So she is entitled to it, it's not like we're not responsible, we are, to see that it's completed.
To a degree. It's a little gray because there was a road dedication portion that they owned to the center of the road. But yes, the developer has always agreed to it. It got included, so yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. No, we trust that Mr. Epstein is gonna.
Yeah, listen,
Well, it sounds like we have Mr. Epstein's money, so
Yeah.
either way, it's gonna get done.
Well, while we're on the whole Reynolds Road, just because that's how I go anywhere, every day. I don't know who discusses with, but it's really dangerous over there now. People don't know when they're supposed to stop, when they're supposed to go. It's a scary, I think it's actually worse, at least for me. You never know who's coming, who's going. My neighbor was in an accident there right after it was switched. I don't see it as being better than what it was, except for the house that doesn't have the headlights on them anymore.
But it was a long history with that, but
Yeah.
by aligning with my road, it made it, one, the bus company was thrilled. And traffic flows, because now you don't have
Maybe
that.
if there was a light,
Hmm?
maybe if there was a traffic light.
There was some studies done, there was a lot of studies done about a traffic light there, it didn't even come close to meeting the warrants. And that was looking at all the town improvements there as well, but it hasn't come to that point yet where a light is going.
I'm just saying, I don't even want to see the light.
This was discussed with the past chief.
Yep.
And he did a study, and as much as we objected, he said the line of sight was good. I don't.
To me, I'm gonna be honest with you, I drive it all day, every day, because I'm in a bus. You had to stop when you came out the other way anyway, it was always a stop sign, so you always had to stop. And you always had to stop off my road. Now, it's just, if you drive, you know the rules of driving.
Right.
There's two stop
But
signs.
people on
Both
people
sides
are
have to
waiting
stop.
are waiting for the Rye Hill. I feel they're waiting for Rye Hill to stop, and these people just keep inching. I'm just saying it's.
Yeah, no, well, Rye Hill has the
scary.
right of way, there's no
Yes,
stop
and
sign
they're
there.
flying.
But they've never had a stop sign there.
Can I just add?
So the flow of traffic, it never changed.
I just think it's scary every day.
I get it.
But
I do agree, like, I think we're the only ones yet, I don't think anybody moved into the houses up close to the street. But we really enjoyed the idea of having the police put the speedometer there. It is true that that area right there, is when I turn, I know the cars inch forward and I mean, we've come really close. When I make the left off of Rydell Road, onto Reynolds Road. You know, there's like a speed factor there too, between Rye and Reynolds, where people definitely are doing more than 25 miles an hour. And that turn is a little odd, where, you know, it's like, people inch forward when I'm making a left, so it's, I mean, thank God I haven't gotten into an accident, but it's really tight there, everybody moving around, so, you know, if not a light, definitely people should slow down, and hopefully there's enough visibility after the house is built, so that people can actually look around the corner at everybody coming and making a turn, if there is no light or anything else.
Anything else? Okay, call the question, trustee Chan.
What was the motion?
Motion reserved to bond reduction.
Bond reduction.
Okay, Chan.
Way off
You guys forgot you made the motions?
I just want to make sure.
Okay.
What vote we're voting on.
All right. Call the question, trustee Chan. Trustee Dwyer. Trustee Berenger. Trustee Conklin. So carried. Next, bond reduction, Crystal Run Healthcare, be it resolved, the board accept the recommendation of the village engineer for Crystal Run project review, engineering, and land survey, PC for bond reduction in the amount of $490,000. Based upon the work completed, will be $10,000 bond remaining. So we need a motion on the recommendation of Dewey to give that reduction and be $10,000 based on.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I'll second it. For discussion. Question.
Yep.
Are they responsible for the part of that, was around the road there? Did they finish doing that? They did.
Yeah, the other issue is Gilbert Street has to fix that
Right.
section. They're working on that. But then,
So are they done then?
yeah, they're done. And we have a letter from the buildings department and just if you want to break down the costs.
That middle section, is that,
At Gilbert Street. It has nothing to do with Smith Farm, has nothing to do with Crystal Run.
is that at the end?
That's going to be, John and I met with them the other day, that's going to be filled in soon, hopefully this week.
So just real quick, maybe you know or don't, they put a bike lane in. I'm just curious. You know why?
Because DOT said you're going to put a bike lane in.
I'm asking.
State road.
Yes, that's
State
why.
road.
The Crystal Run did not propose that. The DOT
Yeah.
came in and said you're putting a bike lane.
And it's so
Who believes
confusing.
it? Bike lane?
It's very confusing because it's in the middle of the
Looks like you
road.
want to pull
Yeah,
off.
it's so confusing. It should probably be marked, I don't know, it's.
Well, they do have signage and it is marked, but especially in the winter, it's.
I think it's so you can pull in there. Like I was in the bike lane.
Yeah, so I said, you, looks like you want to pull into it.
There was a New York State DOT requirement.
That's a designated bike route there.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right, John.
1981, that was put in. Right out there in Harriman.
We're making progress.
All right, so call a question. All right, call a question. Trustee Chan.
Aye.
Trustee Dwyer. Trustee Berenger. Trustee Conklin.
Aye.
So carried. All right, Rosary Procession, Sacred Heart Church. Due to having to submit the approval through New York State DOT, Sacred Heart Church request for their annual Rosary Procession for the feast day of Guadalupe on Monday, 12/12/16 was delayed. Putting on the agenda, receipt from New York State DOT was received by village clerk's office on 12/1. Because the village board did not meet until 12/12, the board was polled and all the trustees approved the annual event. Sign off was received from the building inspector and PD, so I just need a motion to accept the late application. Done. We polled, move on next. Payment authorization, North Main sidewalk. Be resolved, the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of Langton Tully approve payment number 2 for the period ending September 27, 2016, submitted by Consortium Brothers Paving and Seal Coating Incorporated for the North Main Sidewalk Replacement Project. That includes all documentation required by the Orange County Office of Community Development, which has been reviewed and found complete. None of the payment is $26,049.33. Contract B15UC 360105, county contract number 30/158693, S150A15. Mayor Purcell is authorized to sign the voucher payments. We need a motion to make payment.
I'll make the motion.
You get a second?
I'll say.
Discussion? Call question, trustee Chan. Aye. Trustee Dwyer. Aye. Trustee Berenger.
Aye.
Trustee Conklin. So carried. So carried. I'm sorry? I signed out, yes. Thank you.
Oh, I did have a question. Am I allowed to ask a question on a motion already taken?
You can ask the questions, so it doesn't matter. It's really good.
It's directed to John. John, I have a question. In the very beginning of the project, we had done a walkthrough and I was invited by Brian Smith to come to attend that because I kept asking questions and he said, why don't you just come and be at the pre-construction meeting? And I did. And one of the things we talked about was the section of sidewalk that was on Ash,
Extended past Ash.
okay? And that was ready to replace and we were not going to be replacing. So I said, could we take those units and apply them at the other end of 208, where we started to clean that up in that corner, we started entering the village and so forth. And that was something that they said that they could do, and I'm not really sure where all that went, but at the end of the day, it didn't happen. But I do have a question. They did take the project beyond Elm Street. I don't know why.
You could do it. And they weren't paid for it. The reason they did that, I think their workers just were
Happy?
happy and going, because we said the same thing, we're like, what are you guys doing after they ripped it up? And so they didn't look at the plans. So you got that section of sidewalk for free.
Yeah.
And then
Place
as
they
far,
gone.
and then as far as the units that were given on the Ash Street, you know what I'm referring to, by the way, that section down at the bottom?
No, I wasn't at the work through, so I wasn't sure, I'm not sure where you
Yeah, I
were
had
from.
someone, let's see, what was the name from your?
Probably Dawn from
Dawn,
my office.
yeah, Dawn and Brian, and then the Sorty brothers and so forth. And in the conversation, I said, couldn't we take this? And they said, yeah, we could do that. And then it didn't happen. Did I ever come up with anything after the fact? That section and the units, because we paid on 1,100 linear feet or whatever, or however the.
Well, it's all based on how much concrete they poured, so it relates back to the county. So you can't, again, not being there and not knowing what was said, but typically you can't extend or expand the area that you're working in because it's county funded. Unless you go back to the county, they sign it, you approve it, and you do a change order. But just, so the contractor can't say, oh, well, he could, the contractor says, oh yeah, I can do that. But procedurally wise, you have to have the county sign off on it. What happened to that, why it wasn't done, I don't know. I don't know if it was, if the county was ever approached, but it was beyond the original scope. So the county would have had seen a little section, a plan, and then review and approve that. And it may be that it was done and they didn't approve it, I don't know.
I don't know, I was curious because I know the project was based on this, and we got that. I'm just saying, what happened to that? Is it just disappeared?
Well, it wasn't originally in the contract.
It was. The linear footage was where, corner to corner, from Mount to Ash.
I'd have to go back. So you're saying in the original contract, on the plans, it showed that section getting new sidewalk and it wasn't
No.
away?
What he's saying is the linear footage was agreed upon, but they didn't use X amount of feet, they didn't need it, so he wanted to move
That's what I'm
that.
saying, you just can't randomly move it.
Oh, I'm with you, I'm just saying, what happens
But
though?
we paid for it, so,
Well, the county.
right, whatever.
Well, no, you pay for actually concrete installed, so if it was not installed, you didn't pay for that. So there's a measurement, they go in, put the sidewalk, we go in and measure it, the length, the width, we come up with a number, that's what he gets paid for.
Okay.
Right, but if the contract comes out at 200 and it's awarded at 200, and he installs 185.
Yes, which happens quite often, because there's a whole series of things in there, could be an extra water valve, could be that it was overestimated, because you have some fudge in there, but just because the contract's awarded for 200, you can't go beyond the
You can't
limit.
exceed,
Yes.
but you can't come in lower. So what I'm saying is what happens to the 15? Because he was paid, I think, his contract amount, right? He actually came into it for hedges, for $2,400 additional.
There was significant change orders on that project, that we modified.
All I saw was the hedges, it was the only thing I saw him asking.
No, there was other change orders.
And you think the money were applied that way? I'm just asking, what happened to the 15, or whatever the number was, you know?
I'm not confused. You mean the money that the county gave you 200, or is it?
Somebody gave us money, and told
Yeah.
us, spend it, but spend it on this.
That's
So
right.
This is what you were.
So if you come in under that, the county keeps the money.
Okay, and I think that's appropriate, but I'm saying to you that what the contract amount called for was a certain amount of concrete being poured. Less than that amount was poured. Based upon that, there should have been a credit, or it should have been a reduction in the actual cost that was awarded. I'm just asking, was there?
John, can you go back?
I'll have to go back and look, because what you're explaining
And give it
doesn't make sense, because he paid for the contract he's installed. So I keep talking about this 15,000, either it wasn't installed, but he certainly wasn't paid for it. So if you want, I can go back to
That's what Neil was worried about. So can you go back, find out what it is, and send it to all of us, or send it to all of us, and mark it, and then.
I think you probably have it. I'll review the letters that were actually submitted and what the.
And the change orders and everything.
Okay, next is the payment authorization for Carpenter Place sidewalks. Be resolved, the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of Mike and Tony and approve payment number 1 for period ending October 25th, 2016 for Consortium Brothers Paving and Scaffolding Incorporated for Carpenter Place sidewalk replacement project that includes all documents required by the OC Office of Community Development, which has been reviewed and found complete. The amount of payment is $26,049.33. Federal contract number B16-UC-360105, county contract number 30/16893.7150816. Also, you may receive authorization to sign the voucher for payment. Any motion? Second? Discussion? Call the question. Trustee Chan?
Aye.
Trustee Dwyer?
Aye.
Trustee Berenger?
Aye.
Trustee Conklin?
Aye.
So carried.
Point of order, question. On the other motion that we passed, he was correct, we can get that last so many feet of concrete. Should that motion be changed? We table to the next meeting until we find out, instead of just authorizing the pay.
I think that's a legitimate question. So if this is the last payment that the contractor is entitled to, and we have a question of whether the bill is accurately reflective of what was installed, you might want to table it and take the answer, confirm that we did get what we bargained for. That's the fact. That's what he said.
Correct.
Is this the last payment?
Yeah.
So I would, if it's a concern, I would retract your action, your resolution, and have it tabled until we can get confirmation that.
Would you like to make that motion, Wayne?
Whoever made the original motion.
I think you did.
Irene did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So then I'll retract that.
Make a
To
motion
make the motion to
rescind.
rescind till payment completion of work is confirmed.
Correct.
Okay, and the second was Debbie. Call the question. Trustee Chan?
Aye.
Trustee Dwyer?
Aye.
Trustee Berenger?
Aye.
Trustee Conklin?
Aye.
So carried. Next, Village of Monroe Summer Festival Carnival. Be it resolved, the Board of Trustees approve the Activities Committee event application for the 4th Annual Carnival to be held on the North Field of Crane Park from August 3rd through August 6th, 2017, August 3rd and 4th from 6 to 11, August 5th from 1 to 11, and August 6th from 2 to 11. Contingent upon submittal of completed event application listing all participating vendors and their liability as insurance. Preliminary approval of the dates are required to lock in the 2017 dates for the amusement company Shamrock Shows and Amusements. Emergency Service Marshall Sterling will be copied on the approval letter. So any motion to lock in the dates? Second? Discussion?
I do have a discussion. Didn't we have some issues with them, particularly last season?
Yes.
And why would we entertain them again?
Why? Because it was extenuating circumstances that we had last year with all heavy raining and the busted up drain with water wasn't clogging off.
It was more than that.
It was more than
It
that.
was the tickets, it was a lot.
Price reimbursement to the village.
dancing, it was a long line, so I went on sick leave and started helping. That was like the one night, it was nice, and there were a lot of kids. You know, the parents handed me the money that they think it's gonna cost, and it was $25.
We were not notified by the vendor that they changed the ticket pricing after we did the advertising.
So that's
Until
all I
that day.
have to really.
So did we sign a contract at a certain dollar value? I mean,
Well, there was no dollar
No,
value
there's
on the
no
contract.
dollar value on the contract.
Is there now one?
I have to send it back to Scott.
Yeah, I would table this until we get further information.
Okay.
And I'm just curious, because I know that Neil is working on it, not me, but is there a agreement about if, for whatever reason, the carnival can't take place, that the village will pay them X amount of dollars?
There was the same agreement in the past for 3 years.
It was not last year, and so that I have a huge problem with, because honestly, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars off this village, and we get peanuts, and now we're gonna pay them if, God forbid, something happens. It's ridiculous. There are so many carnival companies out there, Jim, that you can get that would be more than willing to come here and give you a better cut than what you're getting right now from Shamrock. And I know it's comfortable because you've dealt with them. I honestly would seek somebody else. And I know Mr. Carl has connections. He's reached out to me, what, a year or 2 years ago with several carnival names. I think that you guys need to do your due diligence and go out and seek somebody else.
We get the contract with Scott, he review it, and we'll take it from there, so we'll table it and review the information required by the board. Okay. Okay, Mr. Mayor's report, I don't have anything in terms of report. Board? Public?
Speaking of carnivals. Is Crane Park open to business again for nonprofits?
Crane Fire?
Yeah, Crane Park. The fire department went there. We used to hold a carnival up there for many, many years.
Absolutely.
So we would be, the village board would allow it if we wanted to come in there.
Fill out the events application, go through the process.
But there are, and I dealt with quite a few carnivals over the years, and what you get percentage-wise and so forth, you gotta be careful with it. But I'll sort of bring it back to our members and see if they want to challenge it. Just a couple things real quick. My last time up, I spoke about Mayor Ronnie Cutstone that's sitting over there. I put a phone call into Jeannie Bonnie and I private messaged Bobby Bonnie on Facebook, and I haven't heard from either one of them yet.
Okay.
But I'll let it sit till after the holidays and reach out to them again just to see if they're interested in possibly moving that.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, you're welcome. And the last thing is, I know you were alluding to earlier about that Monroe corridor up there. The street lighting up there, especially at night, we go up to the bus garage to get fuel for the fire trucks, and we come back. It's dark. The street light is down by Teddy Wright's house for where it used to come out off of the old Reynolds Road onto Rye Hill. There's no illumination really in that intersection. The new intersection.
Right, you're right.
And I think it's something you need to look at, and I brought it up probably 6 months ago. If you're coming down that road, the stop sign, if you're coming towards Reynolds Road on Mine Road, the stop sign is way off to the side. They actually went and notched out the tree limbs around it. But you're almost on top of that stop sign before you see it. You do have a space between the sidewalk and the curbing, that grass island, and that'd probably be a better placement for that stop sign. Just something to think about. I know I brought it up in the past, but.
We'll let the PD look at it again and do the visual.
Definitely some street, you need some kind of lighting in that intersection, because it's, now, correct me if I'm wrong, I know at one time, Wayne and Jim, you were on the board, was that not at one time supposed to be either a three-way or a four-way stop sign?
It was money put away for
that intersection.
It was the money put away for the traffic study and to put an intersection in, but at the time, it was just still, if I remember correctly, a two-way. And then what happened was, unfortunately, a long time ago, they put an expiration date and the money had to be returned, so they couldn't do anything with it to do any infrastructure.
I thought it was going to be a four-way stop. I know we had concerns over cars coming down
the hill.
road, especially if it's a little bit a sliver, they decide everything stops. But I don't know where that ever went.
Police department did recommend, yeah, the police department did recommend to do it.
I really had no reason to bring this up, but when you're talking about the carnival, I want to let you know also, to consider this going forward. My son was at that carnival with his friends, and I was with him. One of the rides was broken, and the workers were allowing the kids on the rides. There was blood on one of the rides because somebody was tossed around inside. It was one of the loopy things, and the kid was tossed around and cut his head on that ride, and they knew that ride was broken, and they kept putting kids on that ride. You know, I have a 12-year-old. He doesn't give two U-Haans about seatbelt. He wants to go on a ride with his friend. I wouldn't have let him go, but, you know, you don't assume that they're not being responsible. So you should be aware of that going forward with that company. I wanted to ask about something that was on the agenda with the copy center, if you want to call it that, the 3-story building on Skinnamarink and 208. Did I hear right that they want their feedback from the planning board because now the usage, the zoning's changing from general business to?
No. The 3 white buildings, the houses that are right on 208, where Jesse used to live, it says exit Realty. Those those buildings right there, has nothing to do with copy.
But yes.
But that zoning, so that's general business, but it's shifting to.
Possibly, it's projected.
If you pass that,
Yep.
it would be shifting.
Yep.
So, that copy center then could apply to be have use other than a copy center in that?
No. The way it was carved out, the copy center would still be GB.
Well, they would be grandfathered in if they chose to keep it a copy center, right? But if they wanted to apply for a different use.
John, it can't be grandfathered, it's a general business.
No, it's a good point, because when, again, this zoning was done, the copy center wasn't there, wasn't even considered.
Correct.
The copy center is in the area that was slated for URA, so
it does fall in there, I
it'd
thought
be
it was
pre-existing
complex.
non-conforming use. However, based upon the lot size, based upon the lot size, you still got the whole apartment stuff.
You can't, do you resent him?
No,
John,
If they wanted to go back and convert that to multifamily, they'd have to go back in front of the planning board.
Right.
But the building itself, based upon the lot size and the lot area and the setbacks, you couldn't get that many units in there per se.
well, but they
So could anybody on any lot do anything they want? Most certainly.
right, and then to that point, they also own those 2 lots in front that could be.
That I don't know.
I don't know.
No, we know they do, so.
I don't know.
Okay, I know they do, I'm sorry. So, all right, I was just curious about that.
On the
Because I
copy
was thinking
center,
nothing's really happened with it for so long. It was one, now it makes sense why nothing's happened with it, why they're holding on to that. And they know that the zoning changes. I
Yes,
just want to
ma'am.
make sure I heard that whole thing correctly.
Yep.
I just have to say, I'm sort of skeptical about a 3.5-story copy center. What is meant by a copy center? How many copy machines are they gonna have in this 3.5-story huge building? I mean, what is that all about? Does anybody know what
John,
use
could you
it?
guys
It's called the copy center. It is not all a copy center. It is a portion of the building is, the first floor and the basement is a copy center. And it's a high-end copy center, multiple. It's not like there's one Xerox machine. It's also office space. So I believe part of the first floor and the second floor is general office space, non-medical. So an accountant, an attorney, or whatever else. So it's not all the copy center, it's just referred to as the copy center building.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
John, you said that's non-medical?
Yeah, non-medical. It was approved as non-medical, based upon the parking.
Let's just throw something out and say, because they bought quite a few houses up Scunnamunk Street.
They bought them all.
They bought them all, and they put a nursing home in there. Can that become a doctor's office?
Well, nursing home isn't, Stony Brook is an SR10 zone.
SR10 zone.
So you can't put a nursing home.
But parallel with 208, almost into the town of Monroe, we go there.
That's an SR10 zone. That's not proposed to be changed.
That's at the power line, John?
What's that?
Are
talking about up by the power line?
No, right, no, down by Jesse's houses, up there in the back.
Okay.
SR10 on the other side.
I'm hearing a nursing home maybe looking at constructed in there.
On the town site? On the town site, Jim?
Oh, in the village, and part of the town.
Oh,
So
the
they
town,
want that whole
yeah.
swath of land all the way through there.
I believe that was one applicant who came this evening and wanted his money back, I'm understanding the parcels we're talking about. Joel,
It goes deep, it goes further back up in there, that's, keep an eye out.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, sure.
I was trying to speed read the comprehensive plan because I should have read it before tonight. Looking at the generic environmental impact statement, I see that in June 18th of 2013, it says, after a hearing that was held by the village board, there was only one commenter from the public that spoke up. I just wonder, was it just nobody showed up, or was it just one person that spoke up? I bring that up because I think that it's very important for everybody to get notifications about the types of things that go on in the village. I'm very interested in being more involved, and I received an email about refuse and the change of garbage pickup and leaves and the Quinn Farm on Sundays, whatever. So why can't I get an email telling me, hey, if you're interested in putting and knowing more about this, or any ideas that you have, this is what is going on. That would be great, because say that something does look interesting, and I want to show up, either hear more about it or have ideas or something to share, then I can show up. But I don't know how people are really getting to know what's going on. Like, I found out about the zoning situation, or plan, whatever, through United Monroe on Facebook. And I don't think that I should have to find out about what's going on around me. Because the village is quite small, I don't think it's like that many things going on where it's like, we're overwhelmed and it's like, So, is there a better way to notify everybody? I mean, email is already there. I already received emails about everything else. Maybe stuff just with a link, not the whole thing printed out there, just a link in the email. This is what's going on, and whoever wants to know more about it can click on the link, and or not.
Anything else?
Yeah, actually, I'll start with piggyback on what she's bringing up, which I totally agree with. Since the website came back from its hiatus, on the bulletin board section where the meetings are listed, sometimes there's two items shared on the same line. Also too, like, for instance, with this agenda, you have workshops and public hearings on the top. I feel like that's deceiving as well. It should be listed on a separate line. It was that way in the past. There was never anything shared on the same line. Two things to click on the same line.
Yeah, and I didn't even know that there was going to be the 6 o'clock workshop.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to know. Yeah, you shouldn't have to. Yeah.
You were going to see it.
We have a new,
We have a new IT person.
Right. No, it's.
We're rebuilding.
Right, and it was bad, not having the information, I think in the summer actually makes it worse, because once you can actually see the meeting minutes, I think you get a little bit of more perspective on what's actually going on, like the planning board and everything like that, so I do think it's pretty crucial. And if, something like that happens, maybe have a Facebook page where,
there used to be a link we don't run that page anymore, but you're right. There's got to be other ways.
How many months was the website down? I I mean,
Quite a few.
no other way, you know, she said, hey, put it on the email, start sending out more emails instead of just leaf pickup.
Right.
You know, send out like, hey, since the website's down, hey, we got a meeting, we have a public hearing,
Right,
this, you know?
We had no one doing it at all at that time.
Well, yeah, well, yeah, and that's what I'm complaining about.
Somebody else step up to the plate, you know, Warwick does, and that's all you ever hear, but you know what, it's not just Warwick, it's Montgomery, it's Goshen, it's Chester, I've been involved with other municipalities in the county now, and I see what they do, and we're, you know,
Well, I think we learned a lot from this. Most importantly, we learned that we don't give just one person the key to the house. So that being said, we are progressively moving forward with making sure that multiple people can do the job of what one person used to do.
But I also think there's people like, you know, my mom's older person, she does not even use her cell phone as a flip phone. She doesn't go on email, she doesn't want to be bothered. You know, there's an older generation that's not looking for email. They want it.
Right, how do we notify them?
They want it, you know, where they can read like Friday photo news, like older generation, well, I mean, I read it too, but like the older generation, that's what they're looking for. Maybe we could have a spot for village news or
Yeah.
village, you know.
We were taken to court on
Yes.
photo news. The photo news cannot be bought on the newsstand, and therefore it's an illegal paper for us to advertise.
Okay, I didn't know that. I'm just thinking, how do you reach out to people that don't?
Yeah, because
you don't need to advertise, but Bob Quinn might be willing to print for just public information.
2 points. Email is fairly basic technology. I don't think you need an expert to send out an email on a list that already exists. And number 2, please don't speak for all seniors about email. I really don't say what all seniors
I
say
didn't
about
say
it.
all seniors.
Well, I think you did.
I'm talking about my mom, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about all seniors, but I'm just saying,
There's people that aren't on.
there's people that aren't into email. I mean, for a long time I wasn't into texting either. But there are, people need to be reached in a lot of different ways. And whatever.
And email is pretty basic, but when you don't have the capability to get into that, right, we were basically locked out of our own system, so.
So we're rebuilding. Anything else?
Sue Morgancy, Village of Monroe. What triggers a traffic study?
For what location?
Okay, I come from Gilbert Street to 17M to go over 208. I used to make that ride from 17M to 208 in one light. It now takes me 3 to 4 lights in the morning on my way to work to get to North Main Street.
Yeah, North Main, to make a left, get out to 17.
And to make my left there. And I don't know, on that 208, there's that, used to be the kitchen cabinet. Okay. Out of that little driveway comes tractor trailers that make the turn and go into oncoming traffic. How is that right?
Well, that's the old Monroe Food Factory, that was a commercial property for many, many years. All those studies would be conducted by the state of New York, that's that state road.
How are they triggered though? How do you get somebody to come and say, this needs to be looked at? That's a dig.
Probably gotta run up to Poughkeepsie, tackle Dan Coots and drag him down here. The DOT is very difficult, we're having an issue.
I'm willing to do it.
We're having an issue with it now, with the Y and trying to get an intersection done for the Y. Believe it or not, they approved that left-hand turn coming up to the Y, state did.
It's unbelievable in the morning.
Probably
And
start-
coming home at night, the same thing, 208, it's backed up all the way to the quick
Yes.
trip.
You could probably start with your police department, because I know with the fire department, we're up there an awful lot for car accidents.
Yep.
So if you can generate a history of motor vehicle accidents in that area, that's another metric.
Actually, I think we do have that already, John, because we had to file for that not too long ago. Somebody had requested that, the left-hand turn accidents. We could just record, I think he had that data, because we also did the tracking of the vehicles going up and down that road.
That's the way you have the YMCA do the traffic analysis.
Yeah, the YMCA is traffic analysis.
There's been a lot of automobile accidents up there, not just down there, just that whole stretch.
So you gotta remember, we're the bottleneck of the whole southeast Orange County area, that everybody comes through the village to get to 17. But it is a problem, surrounding area
You know what, the problem is when they do the studies, they only do them between a certain set hours, and of course, everybody's at work.
Right.
Or it's the summer and everybody's
Yeah,
on
we're
vacation.
August before school starts, so school
They
buses,
did,
everybody's on vacation.
That's when they did this study, by the way. Which is farm development, they did it in August.
Yeah, in August.
Of course.
And everybody's on
Those
vacation.
Right.
Those roadways are, if state, we could reach out, I guess, try to reach out to the Cancoots and see what we can do if we get someone down there.
And also, in the planning process of Guilford Farm, whatever it is, Guilford Street, that detour through a parking lot was considered okay?
There was a school bus stop in that parking lot.
There's been several school buses, and I cringe every time I watch them go, ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. My child rides that school bus, and it is not okay. It's not okay. Seriously, what's going on?
Driving
I
through
agree to cut
one-
once, I
yeah, 'cause-
apologize for interrupting
That's
you.
okay.
But the buses, I twitch every time I see it.
There's no accountability of what goes on day to day on Gilbert Street. Sometimes I pull onto the street, they have one lane closed with no one directing traffic.
Yeah, it's like,
So my lane is enclosed, I'm driving, the person coming from, say, the post office direction, I'm coming from 17M. Now they decide to pull on, I can't blame them because they can't see me. Now luckily we're both doing 15 miles an hour so we don't have a head-on collision. I have to put my car into reverse, back up, so that person can now go, and then I can go and hope that nobody's coming again. That's happened several times. Like with the school bus, my daughter's school bus driver said, well, this was a while ago, like when school started, she, like a half hour late one day. She said what had happened was, I guess there's a stop at the foot of the driveway in Monroe Forest. That all of a sudden it was something totally different that day. Everything was closed. Where was she supposed to? It's not like, oh, so okay, we'll go drive somewhere else.
Right.
Where was she supposed to leave the kids? In Burger King parking lot? You know, and
It's a daily thing, we hear on the radio, Gilbert Street open, nobody knows, go find out.
well, what, like, I don't understand is that if somebody's
who's the authority?
if somebody throws a jackhammer at my car while I drive by, who's responsible for that?
I control all the
Jim
flags.
controls it.
We actually had a meeting the other day again, they are definitely dropped their responsibilities of having flagmen on the job. John O'Rourke, myself, the buildings department, Sean Linderman, we've all met, we're meeting on a daily basis, and they are now required to sign paperwork to make sure they have a flagman on the job every day. That's been the problem, there's been no flagman, one day not, one day not, there's really,
It's even all times of the day.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, they're supposed to be there from the start of construction until the end of the day.
The signage is still horrible too.
That's a joke.
But it was okay for them to have that detour through a parking lot?
Yeah, I mean, what's the liability on that?
I would imagine the parking lot's privately owned, so if the parking lot, the people who own the parking lot,
They gave them permission to do that?
I would imagine they would have had to.
They would have,
I mean, I can't tell you.
There's actually
We're not
three.
allowed, I can tell you this, we are not allowed to be in that parking lot with our school buses. So if our buses were in that parking lot, then they had prior approval. We were never allowed to be in
It's
that
actually
parking lot.
three. It's the Chase parking lot, it's the parking lot for whatever, Dollar Tree,
Yep,
Bagels, and the ShopRite parking lot. Those are all the,
well, they're past the pediatricians, so Chase won't be used as they go through anymore. They're past there where they gotta do their work, so.
so if you want to go to like the businesses or.
You'll be able to access them. We're waiting to speak with the project manager this week to find out we're on the paving and some other things, but they're past the pediatricians now.
And I've also heard them starting work before 7 a.m. I've heard that.
Yeah, many times.
I can't answer that, Jim.
Okay, well, I'm just letting you know, I'm just letting you know.
Working.
I can tell you at 6:38, there was a giant tractor trailer that came down McElroy, the wrong direction, with giant cement pillars on the back of it, because that's my bus route, and I got stuck behind him going all the way up Gilbert Street, or High Street to Gilbert Street. So he was dropping stuff off on Gilbert Street.
No, I can hear actual work, and not just any.
I'm sure you can, I'm over there.
Yeah. Oh, no, I know, but I don't just take it for that. I usually drive past it, so it's not like I'm just like.
So what is
John will be reaching out to the developer, to the contractor on
What time are they supposed to start work?
7 o'clock.
7.
At 7? So if they're there before 7 and they're doing work,
We can stop.
you can call the police department and when you go there?
That's correct. No problem.
Is there going to be any oversight on future materials used on the site? Just because, a lot of people have been making comments about the walls and the materials used for those retaining walls. And,
Don't understand.
they're hideous.
Whatever the planning board approved is what's going on.
Yeah, but I don't know that they're specific to materials on the planning board, because when I was there, they weren't.
John?
Those walls were reviewed and approved by the planning board.
Specifically,
Specific.
the design and materials,
The design and materials.
really.
Who's our materials?
The concrete blocks.
I looked at the architectural renderings and all kinds of.
Anybody else? Okay, need a motion to adjourn?